Hello guys, this is your friend Shinobi Nexus 2.0 and we are back in new fanfic. What if Naruto was secretly Nariko, the girl everyone in Konoha hated since birth? Part 1. Nariko was running as fast as she could, faster than she thought she could, but the body was able to do amazing things when the need is there. And indeed, the need to run and escape was the only thing she could focus on. She felt like a rabbit trapped in a corner about to be fox food. Her breathing was ragged, and broken sobs escaped the strangulation in her throat. This was it. This year they really were going to kill her. She never really understood the village's hatred towards her, but she knew they hated her. Hated her for every day that she has been alive. But it was always on this day that they sought revenge. The 10th of October was supposed to be a special day for her birthday, and it sort of was, only in the run for your life kind of way. Usually, the Anbu that was patrolling the area would protect her from the worst of it, yet today she could not see them at all. What was worse is that the villagers could not see them either, and suddenly this year's beating took a deadly turn. When she realized that this year they were not going to stop, some long-forgotten instinct kicked in and she ran for it. Adrenaline pumping through her body, making her go faster, making her run harder, helping her ignore the pain she was in. Left, right, another left. The fireworks were going off in the sky as the villagers celebrated the Kyubi no Yoko defeat by the Yondyame Hokage. Left, right, another left. Was she going in circles? She could hear the festival, the loud booms of the fireworks, the excited laughter of the children as their parents kept watch as they played. But above else she could hear the heavy footsteps of the drunken crowd chasing after her. Another left, she had run into an alley that had a dead end. Shakily, she ran towards the end, pushing against the wall, trying to scale to the top, but her fingers kept sliding down, refusing to grip the wall and give her a chance to escape. She felt like throwing up. Her mind was a tornado of thoughts so fast and disordered that she felt dizzy. Footsteps. She can still hear the footsteps. Swallowing her breath, she took a few steps back. They were in the alley. Her thoughts were disjointed by the sheer panic she felt, and in a last desperate bid for safety, she jumped onto a trash can and jumped as hard as she can, putting all that she could into that leap. She could feel the fingers closing in on her ankle, but she bit her lip and willed herself faster. She made it. She could hear them cursing, could even hear some of them jumping on the bins to follow her, but she did not stay to see them too. As fast as she could, she ran forward. It did not matter that she did not know where she was, that she has never been this far from the orphanage. What mattered was that the houses were thinning, and more trees appeared, and the further away she got from the village, the less she could hear the footsteps behind her. She ran until she started tripping on her feet, and even then, she got up to keep running. She could not even see clearly anymore, the tears leaking from her eyes blinding her, making the whole world a blur of green. She was not sure how far she had been running, but when she fell again, she could not get up, her body didn't cooperate, and she was left lying under the stars. Ragged breaths and choked sobs were all she could hear. She did not know how long she was lying there before her breathing evened. All she knew was that there were no more fireworks in the sky and the village was dark. She could hear crickets and the insects buzzing at the night, hear soft noises signaling some nocturnal animals about. She could hear no footsteps, no one searching for her. Only her heartbeat and the sounds of the nightlife. Slowly her eyes opened. She can't remember closing them. She can't stay here like this. Even if nobody found her, there were still predators in the wood. She thinks she can remember the orphanage matron telling the other kids not to go into the forest. Nariko thought that was for during the day, but since they were not allowed out at night, she thinks it counts for at night too. Willing her body to get up, she stumbled like a drunkard to her feet before falling and throwing up. She has never been this dizzy before, and the world kept being blurry in and out of focus even after she had stopped crying. Nariko breathed. It's all she felt she could do. In, out, in and out. She had a choice to make. She could stay here in the open and give the villagers the satisfaction of knowing they caused her death, or she could get up, find shelter, and survive. Maybe it was not the healthiest reasoning, surviving just to spite someone. But for Nariko at that moment, it was enough. It felt like something shifted inside. It made her heart burn, but it didn't hurt. It was warm and fiery and fierce, and it was enough to get her to her feet and to stumble around until she found an abandoned, half-caved-in foxhole between the roots of an old tree. She crawled inside, and even though it was musty, full of insects and tiny animal bones, she felt safer inside than she had even in the orphanage. She was bloody and half her body was swollen and bruised, her ribs were tender and her sight still going in and out of focus. But she made it. For tonight, after all that happened, that was enough to bring a small smile to her lips, and Nariko slept peacefully. The next morning when she arrived at the orphanage, the matron stared at her with a look she could not quite decipher. Chasing her inside to the attic where she slept, in the tiny room far away from everyone else. Nariko wasn't quite sure what she was expecting to happen when she got back, but she expected a worried frown like when the other children move away from the matron's sight, or at least a scolding for not coming back last night after the festival ended. Nariko was prepared to explain what happened, how she could not get the door open, and how when she tried to find her, the matron, a mob had formed. But her thought process halted. The matron had not flinched at the sight of her. Nariko was still full of dry blood and had bruises that were only starting to fade. She was still in her dirty and torn clothing. At least she should have been surprised to see her. But she was surprised, thought Nariko with a sinking in her stomach. That look that was puzzling her suddenly made terrible sense. The matron was surprised to see her alive. She was surprised and disappointed that I survived. The door wasn't locked because of unruly villagers, it was locked so Nariko could not get in. As a part of her went cold, Nariko, age 4, swore to never cry again. They were giggling again, thought Nariko dryly to herself, trying not to admit to the painful shards in her heart that betrayed her jealousy. It wasn't as if it mattered to her that she wasn't included. So, what if all the other girls were there? She didn't need to have her hair brushed gently, she didn't need to have it braided while singing songs and telling funny stories. Nariko was fine. She definitely didn't care at all. Besides, what did it matter anyway? Nariko didn't have long hair for the girls to braid, not when the matron always shaves it so short. She couldn't even share her funny stories, not when no one wants to talk to her. She was fine with being left alone, sitting in the attic on her own, hearing them laughing without her. So, what if her chest feels funny like a bruise? She didn't need them, being a girl was far too troublesome anyway. The girls in the orphanage always had to stay clean and weren't allowed to climb trees or play with mud or be loud. Not that Nariko was allowed either, but she felt like she wanted to. It looked much more fun than the knitting lessons the girls had to take. Looking out the window where a few men of the village were teaching the boys to be men, she sighed wistfully. What would it have been like if she had been born a boy? It would probably not have made much of a difference. Nariko winced. Nariko always tried at least to be honest with herself, and being born a boy would not have made her any more popular than she was now. But people looked differently at little boys than at little girls, and she liked to think this would have held true for her as well. Except people do look differently at her, and not in the way with the expectations of a little girl's behavior, but as if she was wrong, as if she wasn't the same as the other children. As if she was worth less, and her very presence tainted the people around her. Nariko swallowed. It was always a heavy thought, knowing that everyone around you thought that you were worth less than anything else alive. Nariko was sure that no one even knew she was a girl. She once thought that the matron had to know, but had to acknowledge that the matron didn't care, and since Nariko has been caring for herself for so long, she had probably already forgotten if she even knew in the first place. Even to herself it sounds a bit ridicule, Not one person knowing her gender, but Nariko had been caring for herself for as long as she has been able. Nobody wanted to take care of her, so she did it herself. Sure, they gave her things like water to bathe with, but it was always the filthy water left over from the other children's bathing. And she always had this ratty dull gray shirt and holy gray pants. It did not look like gray was the original color for either, but after constant use, the color had faded out and dulled to a muted shade of gray to dress herself in. She didn't know if anyone has ever seen her. If Nariko was totally brutally honest, she had not known her gender either. Constantly being referred to as an it, demon or monster had made her think she might not be either and may have been born a different species. She feels silly about it now, but she still remembered her confusion. She had been sitting across the Sandaime Hokage at a ramen stand when the question came up. He sometimes comes and takes her for little walks around the village or, if he had time, to eat ramen. He could not do it often as he was Hokage and had a village to run, but Nariko always treasured the time they spent together. He has never been afraid to be seen with her, and he has never, even before she knew him, glared at her with the cold hate-filled eyes of everyone else. It's why she had taken to calling him Gigi, as he is the closest thing to family that she has ever had. Sometimes she likes to pretend he likes it, and that's why he never tells her to stop. He had been asking her about her day, how she was and what she's been doing when the question had tumbled out of her mouth. Gigi, Nariko begins uncertain, am I a monster? She wants to kick herself once the words are out. She cringes as she waits for him to scold her. She is pretty sure he wouldn't, cause Gigi isn't like the others, but she can't stop her reaction. He looks at her like he's examining her from head to toe, like he can see everything about her. She fidgets as she waits for his verdict. Why would you think you're a monster? He calmly asks her, yet his eyes are sharp and focused on her, taking everything into account as he waits for her answer. Nariko fidgets some more and tries to find the words. I'm different, she finally exhales. The best of us are, he replies, his tone of voice calm and soothing. No, I'm different. Not like you, different. Different from the kids at the orphanage and the others in the village. People treat me different, and so I thought maybe it's because I'm not the same as them. You know that instead of being a child, I am a monster. Nariko breathes nervously, feeling her heartbeat rapidly as the tension at the table rises. The Sandaime pauses as he thinks, still examining her with thoughtful eyes. His expression never changed, but the air around him became charged. Nariko, I assure you that you are no more a monster than I am. He calmly says before he focuses on her intently. No one has the right to treat you different. You are a child of this village, and are valuable to us all. The Hokage let out a sigh as he seems to sag slightly in his chair as if a heavy burden rests on his shoulders. Unfortunately, not everyone acknowledges this, and even as Hokage, I can't force people to follow my decree. He let out another sigh. Then why do they hate me? Nariko asks a bit tearfully, her heart still hammering in her chest, but painful as if it was being slowly squeezed. She did not like this feeling as her throat felt closed and she started feeling warm. I didn't do anything, Gigi. I promise. The third closed his eyes in sorrow. Seeing her like this, it reminds him of his failure to protect her. He can almost see Minato behind her glaring at him for the pain his village is causing his daughter. I don't know, Nariko, he said quietly, looking at the girl who was supposed to be the hero of the village. I think you remind them of the terrible night 5 years ago. That's stupid, muttered Nariko, glaring at the salt shakers. I'm not a monster. I'm a child. Right, Gigi. The Hokage smiled, laughing a bit under his breath. Right, Nariko, you are not a monster but a precious little girl. He relaxed his shoulders as the tense atmosphere around the table once more became relaxed. Gigi. Nariko began uncomfortably again. What does being a girl mean? The Sandaime looked at her in slight disbelief before looking uncomfortable. Nariko has never seen Gigi this uncomfortable and wondered if she said something wrong. You said I'm a girl, right? She wondered aloud. Sarutobi Hiruzen wondered how it had come to this and who is to blame. Staring at Nariko in disbelief, he can't help but think of how bad her carers were failing her. He took a deep breath and while trying to think of a way to explain the concept. Thankfully he had his own sons, so he was not totally unprepared, but still how to explain. A boy is basically the same as a girl, they only have different body parts, which you don't have to worry about until you're older. He explained, trying to keep it as basic as possible. Usually, girls will have long hair and wear pretty dresses and boys will have short hair and be messier. He hoped that that would be enough explanation to explain the difference to her. She was only 5 years old, she didn't need more than the basics. So, girls have long hair and boys don't? Nariko asked for confirmation. Yes and no. Usually, which means most of the time, girls have long hair. Sarutobi explained. So how am I a girl if I have short hair? Nariko asked, gesturing to her short cropped hairstyle. Girls can have short hair too, Nariko. It's the body parts we can't see that make the difference. The Hokage patiently explained, more at ease with the topic. If we can't see them, how do we know the difference? Nariko was confused. How did invisible body parts fit into this? The Hokage chuckled at her confusion. It's not invisible, Nariko. It's just hidden under our clothes. No one is supposed to see those body parts, it's private. Nariko was still not sure she totally understood, but she nodded her head and said, okay, anyway. The rest of the meal had gone more calmly, and no strange conversation topics had come up, but as they went their separate ways, both had a lot on their mind. Nariko tried to find peace with the fact that it was not her fault, all the anger and hate, and that she wasn't a monster or demon. But that hurt more, to know she should have been treated like the other kids, so she rather tried to think of the ramen she had. The Sandaime was tired after seeing how far the villagers that Nariko was sacrificed to protect would go to see harm to her. For her to not even know she was a child. He could not let this go on. The orphanage was obviously not the best place for her, and she was 5, he had to think about this. Despite her initial confusion, Nariko tried being a girl. She tried learning to giggle softly instead of guffaw when she laughed, tried to sit primly when seated and to be dainty and soft-spoken. Except for no one noticed or cared, and trying to do them felt wrong. Nariko liked laughing loudly, liked sitting comfortably, and having to eat slowly when at any time her food could be taken made her anxious. She was just starting to decide being a girl is troublesome when she learned the truth. Being a girl is dangerous. She had been locked outside again. It was a stormy and cold night even in the fire country. Nariko was briskly walking with her head down in the shadows, not wanting anyone to spot her. Her heart hurt knowing that all the other at the orphanage were warm in their beds and that only she was locked out. She sort of accepted it, in a resigned way of accepting her lot in life, and knew there was nothing she could do, so she pushed back her emotions and started searching for shelter. It was getting colder, and she was sure she heard some footsteps coming from the front, so Nariko quickly turned right at the next turn into an alley between 2 buildings. She was so focused on hearing if the footsteps came closer that she almost missed the scuffle taking place next to her. Trigger warning start. Her back against the wall and her heart in her throat, Nariko tried to see into the dark beside where she was standing. She could sort of see a shape in the dark, maybe a big man. And was there someone else? She had thought maybe it was a couple of drunks like she sometimes saw when she got locked outside, then she heard a whimper and a half-choked sob. Shocked, she looked closer and saw that the big shape was pushing the smaller into the wall. It was a girl. A flash of lighting had streaked through the sky, and for a split second Nariko took in the scene. She wished she hadn't. There was a man choking a girl against the wall. She was crying, but he was smothering her. Another pained sound escaped her, and the man slammed her head against the wall. Shut up. He snarled at her. Nariko felt frozen. Fear was choking her, and she couldn't breathe right. She wanted to run, but the face of the girl kept staring at her in her head, kept begging for someone to save her. But Nariko didn't know what to do either. She was so much smaller than them. Still, Nariko remembered the fear of fighting for her life from the mobs, the absolute terror of thinking that no one would save her. Taking a deep shaky breath to gather her courage, Nariko yelled, "Stop it!" at the top of her lungs, hoping someone would hear her and come help. She jumped on the trash can before jumping on his back, trying to force him back. The man startled before getting angry. Being so close to him, she could smell the alcohol on him. It's not the first time she has smelled it. He reached up behind him and dragged her off his back. She kicked and scratched at him, but he was stronger than her and firmly got a hold on her. "Why, you little brat!" He hurled Nariko into the wall and started walking towards her. Nariko's head hurt when she collapsed against the wall. It felt as if someone ran over her with a merchant's caravan. She could spot the other girl lying limp against the trash can, could hear her crying alongside the ringing in her ears. "Run!" She wanted to yell, but her head felt muted, and her lungs strained for air. She looked up at the man looming over her as he pulled his leg back to give her a kick. The girl was now in hysterics and Nariko was bracing herself for the pain. "Trigger warning end." "Not so fast," said a voice from behind the man. There was suddenly someone standing there. A weasel mask adorned their face, and they had a restraining hand on the man's shoulder. The Anbu, Nariko thought in relief. They were safe now. She could see another masked ninja attending to the girl while the one in the weasel mask apprehended the man who assaulted her. Nariko heard a whoosh sound and suddenly the busy alley was startlingly empty. Nariko sighed before winching. Her back and chest hurt from where the man had hurled her into the brick wall. She got up and started heading out of the alley. She still didn't know where she is going to sleep tonight, and the storm was still building. She had almost made it out when there was another whoosh sound, and the Anbu weasel was standing in front of Nariko. He crouched down in front of her frozen form. "Hello, little one," he gently greeted her. Nariko sort of gave a nod back. She wasn't sure. She was still reeling from the throw and the horror of the night. "What's your name, little one?" Nariko blinked, sure there was someone talking to her. "Little one." He tried again. "Nariko," she whispered, feeling as if her senses were covered in a thick fog. "Nariko, a pretty name. Why are you outside, Nariko?" Nariko tried to shake off the disorientation as she tried to understand what he was asking. "Walking." She looked at him confused. Did he not see her walking before he stopped her? Suddenly he looked intently at her. "Nariko, look at my eyes," he demanded gently before peering carefully at her pupils. "Are you feeling dizzy? Can you count my fingers?" He held up his fingers for her to see. Nariko tried frowning at him. Of course, she could count. She was 5, not 2, but she was a bit dizzy, and try as she might, she could not actually see his fingers. 2, she lied, before blushing at his unamused silence. "Why are you outside, Nariko?" he asked again, standing from his crouched position as he began leading her somewhere. "Orphage, orphanage," she tried to explain. "Orphanage," he corrected her. "That one," she nodded wisely. "It's locked," she said simply as if he should already know the answer. The fog was lifting from her. She started taking notice that he was leading her somewhere. "Where are we going?" she demanded, trying to stop moving. "The hospital," he stated, now dragging her along. "Why?" Quote. She started struggling harder than before. "You are injured." He stopped to look at her in question. "Why are you struggling?" Nariko was indeed still struggling to get away. She stopped. "No reason," she mumbled, looking away from him. "Right." He started walking again. "Wait," Nariko shouted. "I'm fine." He paused in disbelief. "Then why could you not count my fingers?" He was sure he had her there. It was dark, okay, she dared him with her eyes to refute the fact. Okay. He paused under a shop's light, crouching in front of her again. Then count them now. Nariko glared at his stupid masked face before looking at his fingers. She almost sighed with relief. 3. She gloated. Right. He started walking again. What? Why? Nariko squawked as she was pulled away. I was right. He kept on walking, now ignoring her. Nariko tried pulling away but found herself truly stuck. She tried to ignore her growing fear as she tried to convince herself it would be okay. But the matron would often threaten her with the hospital, telling her that is where they take the unwanted children to experiment on. Please, Nariko finally whimpered, close to tears. The Anbu agent Weasel paused, this time in confusion. He looked closely at her face, trying to see if this was a deception. Seeing she really was scared, he debated in his head over what to do. With a sigh, he started walking again, but this time in a different direction. Come on, he said, gesturing for her to walk beside him. Nariko sniffled and rubbed her eyes. She never cries. She can't believe she almost cried tonight. She hesitantly walked beside him. Weasel-san, where are we going now? She questioned. I'm taking you home, he replied. Home? Nariko stumbled to a stop, bewildered. The orphanage, he clarified, looking at her confused again. Oh. Nariko blushed at her reaction. Where else would you go? The weasel-faced Anbu questioned her. Somewhere. She avoided the question, not looking at his face. Nariko, please look at me. He paused again. As she hesitantly looked at his face, he continued, it's not safe out here, especially for little girls. Look what happened in the alley tonight, and she was only a few years older than you. Nariko looked at him, trying to think on how to phrase her question. Isn't the Anbu there to stop it from happening? He stared back at her, his mask giving away none of his emotions, but the air around him felt weighted. The Anbu isn't always on time. We work more for the Hokage than the civilians. Nariko swallowed nervously, wondering what's worse than being choked to death, but before she could question him, he started walking again. Nariko thoughts occupied her during the walk through town. Being a girl wasn't just troublesome anymore, it was dangerous, and Nariko was sure that she didn't want to be a girl anymore. When the matron opened the door to find an Anbu outside, she went white as a ghost. She didn't even protest Nariko being inside. Instead, Nariko was told to go to bed, and then she locked the door with her hands shaking. Nariko laid in her bed, shaking slightly at the fact that she could have died tonight. When he finished killing the girl, he would have surely killed her too. But more important to her was the fact that being a girl could get her killed or worse. And Nariko had no intention of that happening to her. Even though she wasn't exactly sure what worse was, if being a girl was so dangerous, she would just have to be a boy. Nariko blearily glared at the sunlight stretching towards her. Yesterday's memories kept repeating itself in her head, making sleep impossible. Reluctantly, Nariko crept out of her futon, her determination to succeed in her task her only motivator. She was more determined than ever to stop being a girl, and that meant getting help from the one person that even knew she was a girl. Gigi. Nariko knew that a lot of her determination and fear stemmed from what she witnessed, could admit that changing her gender, at least hiding her gender, might be an overreaction. But Nariko could not block out that little voice inside of her that kept fanning her fear. If it is so dangerous being a normal girl, how much more dangerous would it be for her, the demon girl, the one no one would miss, that no one would help? If someone hurt a little girl, others would step in to stop it. For her, they might just join in if they did not walk away. And Nariko was scared. The face of the older girl kept flashing in her head, the terror in her expression, the hopelessness in her eyes. She had been convinced that her fate was inescapable, and her struggle had been out of hopelessness. If Nariko had not been there, that would have been true. But there is no one that would step in for Nariko, and so Nariko would have to protect herself. And Nariko could protect herself. Nariko had sworn that she would never just accept her fate, never stop fighting for her right to live. But even she had to admit that the man had been much larger than Nariko, much stronger. Had the Anbu not arrived, then Nariko might not have been here to even remember it. And that scared her, that being a girl means someone could hurt her before she could become strong enough to protect herself. It felt as if her organs had turned to stone, weighing her down with the inescapable truth. A sense of urgency clawed at Nariko, urging her to hurry up, to save herself. Nariko took a deep breath. She knew it was just the fear clawing at her, that no one even knew she was a girl. But it was difficult to banish the images in her mind. Escaping the dreams where she was in the girl's place and that everyone who passed by just stopped to laugh. Nariko glared at herself, irritated at her vulnerability. So, what if they would laugh? So what if no one will help? She was going to help herself. She was Nariko Uzumaki, and she was no one's victim, believe it. Walking down the streets in Konoha has never been as daunting as it was that morning. Nariko kept having to stop herself from flinching every time someone came near her. She felt like jumping out of her skin and was hyper-aware of every glare that came her way. Feeling like a bug under a microscope, Nariko tried going unnoticed. But even shrinking into herself didn't help. It felt as if it provoked the glares into getting worse. Nariko could feel the tension in her shoulders, could feel the muscles straining as she hunched into herself, wishing she could be invisible. She caught a glimpse of the blurry outlines of a ninja jumping over the rooftops and wished she was able to use that method. Nobody was even looking at them, they were so fast they blurred. Nariko clenched her jaw. It couldn't be so hard to go unnoticed. Nariko squared her shoulders and focused on her surroundings. What can I use to go unnoticed? She eyed a few pieces of washing that could work as a disguise, but then there was the risk that someone might notice her taking them, and having to run from a mob chasing her for stealing the clothes was the last thing she wanted. So instead, Nariko tried to stick to the shadows of the alleys and the buildings. It was an exercise in frustration. She tried blending into the shadows and it appeared to be working, but then someone would catch a view of her, and the mutterings would begin. It got to the point that the villagers would chase her from the front of their buildings, accusing her of trying to sabotage their stores. Nariko could feel their anger, and it caused a bitter taste to linger in her mouth. She felt hot and cold at the same time as she walked down the street, staring resolutely forward to not give them the satisfaction of seeing her affected. Her stomach churned fiercely, and it felt like at any moment she could start spitting flames as a warm acid feeling pushed up her chest, pushing aside her lungs and making her chest feel heavy. Nariko swallowed down the feeling. She could not let them affect her. Breathing into heavy lungs, she ignored her surroundings and just breathed. She could do it. It doesn't have to be today, but one day Nariko was going to be good enough to go unnoticed, where nobody would know she's there unless she wills it. With her feelings resolved and her goal set, Nariko started paying attention to her surroundings again. She stopped short. The buildings around her looked familiar. And not in I see this everyday familiar, more in the I have walked past here twice familiar. Nariko tried to remember the way to the Hokage Tower but came up blank. Nariko could feel the heat rising in her cheeks as she remembered she has never been to the Hokage Tower and therefore didn't know how to get there. She was pretty sure her head was on fire as even her ears felt warm. She was never going to mention this to anybody, ever. Embered Nariko determinedly ignored her blunder and hurriedly made her way to Ichiraku Ramen. Old man Tuki probably knew the way. The Hokage Tower was a big looming building that was taller than all the buildings in Konoha. It towered over Nariko as she stood at the entrance. It was a fairly busy place. Ninjas were everywhere going in and out. Nariko has never actually seen so many ninjas before. She was a bit intimidated. She swallowed down her nerves and steeled her spine. I can do this, she vowed. 10 minutes later, Nariko was standing exactly where she started. The building guard didn't even let her start talking before he kicked her out, and no matter how many times she tried, she always ended up here. Glaring at the building in front of her, Nariko sat on the floor. If she wasn't allowed in to see Gigi, then she would sit here and wait for him to come out. Meanwhile, the Sandaime Hokage was feeling his age. I'm too old for this, he frowned as he looked at the building in front of him. This was the 5th building he has visited, and so far, as soon as his request was heard, he could see the excuses pile up. Putting on a smile he wasn't feeling, he knocked on the apartment manager's door. The door opened to show a heavily scowling man opening his mouth, likely to shout at whoever was knocking. When he registered who was in front of him, he immediately dropped into a bow. "Hokage-sama," he stammered out. "Good evening," the Sandaime greeted. Hiruzen Sarutobi walked to the Hokage Tower ready to finish his work for the day. He was tired in a way that was all too common these days, especially when concerning his late successor's daughter. It weighed heavily on his mind how this village was treating little Nariko, and hoped he had at least solved one of her problems. "I'm tired," thought the man known as the god of shinobi. He has been working too hard. He was sure he had just imagined seeing Nariko. No, he had just seen Nariko. Nariko was, in fact, sitting cross-legged in front of the Hokage Tower, ignoring the activity around her. What did they do now? Wondered the professor as he came to a stop next to Nariko. "Are we waiting for someone?" he asked, looking at the door askance. "Gigi," Nariko cheered. She jumped up and hugged him, uncaring for the looks she is getting. "You took a really long time to come out, you know," she pouted in indignation. He looked closely at her, and seeing how stiff her movement is, he knew she must have been sitting there a while. Frustration bubbled up before the Hokage ruthlessly suppressed it. While it might relieve his anger to allow a bit of killing intent to leak in the direction of the building, he didn't want Nariko to think he is mad at her. Instead, he smiled down at her, letting his affection towards her show. "Is that so?" he said mildly. "Well, I'm here now, aren't I?" Nariko was so relieved when Gigi showed up she almost forgot what she wanted to ask him. Gigi," Nariko hesitantly began, "is there somewhere we can talk? You know, private." Nariko could feel her ears burning again. Her stomach felt fluttery, and she was kind of nauseous. The Hokage looked at her, and Nariko nervously wondered what he was seeing. "I might know a place," he smiled gently at her, and Nariko felt her nerves disappear. This was Gigi. If there is one person she knew she could trust, it would be the Hokage. For whatever caused people to hate her, Gigi never had. For that reason alone, she would love him, but he had never misused her love as others would have, and therefore Nariko trusted him with her life. She would trust him now with her plans. The Sandaime led Nariko to an apartment building on the outskirts of town. Nariko looked at him in question, but he just smiled at her and led her to the lone apartment on the top floor. Nariko was ready to start questioning him when the Hokage opened the door with a key and led her inside. Inside there was a small kitchen area and a living room dining room combo. Through the door on the side, she could see a bed, so that was probably the bedroom. "Gigi?" Nariko questioned finally, no longer being able to maintain her silence. "Yes." The Hokage looked at her in question, as if he had not just led her to a random apartment that she has never seen before. About to ask where they were, Nariko paused before opening her mouth. As curious as she was, she had a more pressing matter. "Gigi, I need to be a boy." The venerable elder blinked slowly, opened his mouth and closed it again. "A boy?" he asked slowly, as if turning the words over in his mind. Nariko started feeling the flutters again, so before she lost her courage, she recounted what had happened last night. As her story progressed, the Sandaime face became grimmer and serious. "And I don't think they would help me if I need it, so I want to be a boy so that nobody gets the chance." For the second time today, the Hokage acutely felt his age. There are things even a Hokage can't prevent, and crime is one of them. And while crime rates in a hidden village are much lower than elsewhere, these things still can happen. It saddened the man to know the little girl in front of him had witnessed such a heinous attempt. And worse still was her conclusions. A part of him rebelled fiercely at the notion that any human being would allow such attack to happen, the part that believed in people, the part that believed Minato when he said she would be seen as a hero. Sadly, that part was smothered by the knowledge that Minato's faith was misplaced. The part that had seen the depth of cruelty the village dealt towards Nariko, and he couldn't refute her claims as much as he wished to. So as much as it grieved him to hide a part of the girl he saw as a granddaughter, he sat down and helped her plan. That night saw Nariko tossing on her bed. Yes, a bed. Nariko could hardly believe it. Gigi agreed with her and helped her plan, and then as she got ready to leave, Gigi gave her the key and said it was hers now. Hers. As in a place where no one could lock her out of. No more running from drunken mobs because she would be safe in her bed. In her own apartment. But the real treasure, the thing that made it priceless, was a small seal Gigi showed her that was carved next to the door. A seal that would prevent anyone not keyed in from entering. Nariko has never felt as safe as she did at that moment. She was still basking in the feeling hours later. No, the reason for her tossing had nothing to do with fear as it did the night before. No, it was the quiet that got to her. Even as far removed from the others as she was in the orphanage, the noise was always present, and as much as she was despised, the noise created an illusion that she wasn't alone. But here in this new apartment, there was no noise. No illusion. And as nice as being safe felt, it didn't hide the fact that she was all alone. Nariko stared up at her nice white ceiling. She was fine. She didn't care that she was alone. So, what if the others? But lying there staring at the ceiling with no one around, all alone, she couldn't lie to herself. It wasn't fine. It hurt. A lot. And she did care. In fact, she cared so much that it felt as if the gap in her heart was a physical wound. And it has never been okay that the others had what she craved so desperately. Lying awake, still staring at her new ceiling, Nariko wondered what it would be like. To have others to hug and laugh with, someone to tease and play with. Someone who would care if she got hurt. And she wished it with her whole being. She burned with the desire so hotly she wondered if she would turn to ash. I will have that, Nariko vowed. Her throat felt thick and her head heavy, but her heartbeat was steady. She was Nariko Uzumaki and someday she will be loved, believe it. Naruto nervously scratched at his head. She felt as she walked down the street. The Hokage solution was so simple while being so complex it made Nariko's head spin. It was a small pendant Nariko had to wear that had a seal on it. The part that made Nariko's head spin was the fact that to her it didn't change anything. The Hokage had explained it to her, but she had sort of lost him when he got to the inner perception part. Basically, it was a complex genjutsu that didn't change her gender, it made people ignore her gender. He did tell her that it wasn't foolproof if she irrevocably proved to be a girl, they would know she was a girl. When she looked at him funny, he told her, if you wore a skirt, they would look at you funny for dressing like a girl, if you stripped, they would know you are a girl. Needless to say, she wished she hadn't asked. But still, it made him nervous. Nothing had changed though in the 6 months that she had it. In the beginning, a few people looked at him suspiciously, but he suspected it may be because of how jumpy he had been acting. The first day had been hard. Sliding into a chair at Ichiraku Ramen, Nariko had kept waiting for a Yame to laugh at her for pretending to be a boy. It didn't come, and Naruto had received the same smile and cheerful greeting as Nariko had. It had messed with her head. It was as if she couldn't see the difference. And maybe she hadn't. Naruto had never worn dresses and had never really acted like a girl, so maybe it hadn't been that surprising. It had still made her incredibly nervous to be outside though, and maybe a bit sad. Nariko couldn't explain the sad part. She had felt the beginning of hope blooming in her chest and the relief bubbling behind her teeth, but her stomach had felt heavy, especially when looking at Ayame's smiling face. Ayame had been smiling at Naruto as she smiled at Nariko. Naruto hadn't lingered long at the ramen stand. Her confusion had sent her back into her new apartment, trying to sort out her emotions. It shouldn't have been a bad thing for Ayame to not notice, but it had. Nariko, who had so few precious people to care about, was upset that Ayame didn't notice the change, that maybe she hadn't cared about Nariko at all. Nariko had spent a week in her apartment trying to accept that the change had consequences, consequences she never imagined. It was during this time the Hokage came to see her, wondering how she was adapting. Nariko was sitting in her living room. Her own living room. She had been staring at Konoha from her window trying to soothe the rolling of her stomach. She was questioning everything, trying to swallow past the lump in her throat. She knew it wasn't helping, avoiding everyone. But what if? The knock on the door almost made her jump out of her skin. Nariko had to swallow twice to remove the knot in her throat. Breathing heavily, she opened the door to find the Hokage on the other side. Gigi. Nariko sagged in relief. No matter how conflicted she was feeling, she was glad to see him. Nariko smiled the third gently. He observed the tension in her frame and her obvious relief at the sight of him. May I come in? Nariko felt heat spreading on her cheeks, embered. Of course, Gigi. She stepped aside, allowing the one figure that made her feel safe to enter her home. Pausing after entering, Hiruzen looked quizzically at the frozen Nariko. Gigi, what do I do now? She finally muttered, embered while kicking the ground lightly with her foot. The Hokage, usually adapted at understanding her questions, was nonplussed. Do what, Nariko? Nariko could feel fire spreading to the tips of her ears, leaving her whole head on fire. Pushing down the urge to hide, she took a breath, feeling herself straightening with the courage she didn't know she had. Looked at her. Gigi. This is my house now, Gigi. And I know I won't have a lot of guests, but I want to do this right. Smiling at the still blushing Nariko, the Hokage nodded in understanding. Well, first you would greet your guests and invite them in, and then depending on the guest you would let them sit down and offer some tea. Nariko nodded and led the Hokage to the living room. Please sit, she requested before freezing again. Gigi, how do you make tea? The rest of the afternoon ped similarly. The knot that had been strangling Nariko slowly loosened its hold by spending time with her. Gigi. He helped her make tea and then a simple meal. All the while watching Nariko with the same caring eyes as always. And Nariko let go of the questions. It didn't matter that nobody noticed, that's what she had wanted after all. There was someone who cared, and for Nariko that was enough. The next day, Naruto was back at Ichiraku Ramen, smiling at Ayame, and ordering the biggest bowl of ramen available. It was still bittersweet. Naruto was glad it worked, but it stung that it worked so well. Distracted at her thoughts, Naruto turned around the corner and almost ran headfirst into a confrontation happening in front of her. It was a small girl, about her age, that was being beaten up by three big-looking boys. Although their size being seen in relevance to Naruto's, that didn't say much. Naruto didn't know what started the fight, all she could see was the small girl with strange eyes being knocked down. That's what kept happening. The boys would knock her down and tell her to bow in apology, but as soon as she gets up to do it, they knock her over, mocking her failure and telling her to apologize for her arrogance. Naruto couldn't judge who was right here, she wasn't there at the start. But Naruto couldn't see anything in the girl that spoke of arrogance, all she could see was the defeated slump of her shoulders and the beginning of belief in the nonsense they were saying. All the hesitance of entering a fight she wasn't part of ended when she spotted the acceptance in her eyes. It didn't matter if the girl did something or if she didn't. No one had the right to make her accept defeat. No one had the right to make her believe she was less than they are. And if the girl with the strange eyes couldn't or wouldn't fight for her right, Naruto would fight for her. Because that acceptance in her eyes made Naruto angry. Angry at those boys, angry at the girl for giving in, and angry at herself for once having been in her place and for once almost having accepted defeat. Naruto took a breath in, and when the boys opened their mouths to taunt the girl again, she moved. Quickly before they even saw her, she struck the first boy behind his leg. As he was falling, she shoved the next one into his friend. All three boys were on the ground, but before she could shout in triumph, the ringleader got up to face her. Well, looks like there is another runt out looking for a fight today. Naruto had only a moment to think before she had to react. She saw the first fist aimed at her face and dogged, but then she felt a sharp pain in her back as she soared through the air. She tried to cushion her fall with her hands, but that only tore the skin clean off. Naruto glared at the boy who kicked her. Seeing their smug faces, believing they have won, her determination roared in her ears. It wasn't even only about the girl anymore. Naruto refused to let the jerks think they are better than her, that they had defeated her when the whole village has tried and failed. It might have also been a case of bruised pride, but to Naruto, she had something to prove. Naruto stayed low, lowering her shoulders and head. Just as she suspected, the boys came to rub in her defeat. She kept her head low, watching their shadows stretch towards her. When she felt they were close enough, she threw her hand full of pebbles and dust in their eyes, and while they were swearing, Naruto ducked low and tripped them. She didn't bother to gloat this time. Instead, while they were down, she grabbed the girl's hand and ran into the forest surrounding the area. Konoha's trees were thick and tall, mighty titans who stretched to the sky to protect Konoha and hinder her enemies. For many kids, the forest in and surrounding Konoha was a place of mystery and forbidden adventure, and as such it was not a place many of them ventured to. To Naruto, it has always been a haven from the glares and mutterings of the general populace, so Naruto did what she always does when seeking shelter in the forest. She ran deeper into the trees until the sound of the village turned faint and the view around is only trees. Satisfied that the boys were behind them, and no one was pursuing them, Naruto turned to the girl whose hand she had been holding and offered her a sheepish grin. Naruto didn't know what to do. The roaring in her ears has died down and the anger was drained. All she felt now was sort of embered and in a bit of pain. Well, that happened. She offered the other girl. To her surprise, the girl with strange eyes looked at her and burst into tears. Naruto panicked. She never had to comfort anyone before, and no one has ever comforted her as she cried, so she might have lost her cool, a little. Wah! Are you okay? Are you dying? Naruto felt her heart doing jumping jacks in her chest. Oh no, you are. Naruto almost started crying as well. We need a medic. Quickly she ran around looking for a medic. How one would be in the forest she didn't know, but she needed a miracle quickly. And surprisingly she got one. A giggle. A soft one, but it was enough for Naruto to calm down and look at the other girl. She had her hands clapped over her mouth, trying and failing to keep the giggles in. Naruto could feel her ears turning red. Her heart started boiling and her eyes prickling. She turned her head away so that the other girl can't see her hurt. The giggling stopped. I'm sorry, the girl apologized. I wasn't laughing at you. Naruto turned her head back, glancing out of the corner of her eye to see if she is serious or making fun of her. To Naruto's surprise, the girl was bowing in apology. Oh, it's fine, mumbled Naruto, not used to this in the least. My name is Hinata Hyuga, thank you for saving me. Oh, I'm Naruto Uzumaki, and it's fine, I guess. Naruto's head was still burning in emberment, but her heartbeat evened out and the pressure that had risen in her lungs deflated. Duh. Thank you again for saving me, Hinata stuttered, still bowing. Naruto was pretty sure that her head was on fire. It's fine, she swallowed and then turned sternly towards the still bowing Hinata. Stop bowing already. Hinata jerked upright in surprise. Still looking stern towards the girl, Naruto lectured her heatedly. You shouldn't bow your back for everyone. Those boys didn't deserve an apology and I don't need one. Accepting fault for others' actions and putting them on you is stupid. That's like accepting the option of others as a truth. Naruto felt like spitting fire. She wasn't sure she was even talking about the girl anymore, and that made the words ash in her mouth. Hinata looked at the other boy as if seeing him for the first time. Never before has anyone said that to her. Sure, there was plenty of lectures on how Hyugas didn't bow to anyone, but always out of arrogance, a casual acceptance that they were better and didn't need to bow. But this boy said it like a defiance, that as a person the only apology needed was for oneself, and that the only opinion that mattered was what oneself believed to be true. Hinata felt lightheaded. It felt like years of belief has been turned on its head by this boy who came out of nowhere and changed everything. Naruto shook her head, ridding herself of her contemplations. It didn't matter for who she had said it was true, but becoming upset at Hinata for things that can't change in Naruto's world was just as stupid as she claimed Hinata's actions to be. Looking at the sky, Naruto saw it was already late in the afternoon. Come on, let's get out of here. She gestured to Hinata, showing her the sun. But Hinata was more fixated on Naruto's hands. In all the excitement, Naruto's hands had remained dusty, but with the ping time it had become muddy with the blood from the cuts. Your hands. Hinata rushed forward and grabbed the appendages. Naruto, who had honestly forgotten about them, was startled at the rush. Hey, it's fine. Honest. She protested, flailing a bit. Hinata was not amused. You're bleeding. She glared back at Naruto's hands. Naruto was stunned at the ferocious focus of the previous timid girl. She didn't know how to respond. I'm fine. She tried protesting again, but it was useless. The girl, Hinata, had started dragging her to the river. Still having a focused look in her eyes, Hinata started cleaning the dirt and blood from Naruto's hands. Naruto blushed from the tip of her ears. Nobody had ever insisted so persistently to help her. It was nice, her heart beating fast in a strange way, but her face was aflame. She had never had to deal with a situation like this before. There are no wounds, Hinata exclaimed, studying Naruto's hands with fascination. Naruto flailed in emberment. I told you I'm fine. Hinata just stared at Naruto in amazement. Quickly trying to change the subject, Naruto pointed towards the sun again. We need to go back to the village. It's getting dark soon. As Hinata glanced around, she saw that the boy was correct. The sun was setting. Hinata looked at the ground in emberment. I'm sorry, she mumbled before remembering the brave boy's words. Looking up, she peered through her hair at Naruto. Thank you for saving me. Naruto felt heat spread over her cheeks as vivid as the sunset. Nobody has ever thanked her so sincerely. Blushing bright red, she mumbled back it's fine. Naruto shook her head, shaking off the weird feelings this strange girl invoked. Deciding it would be better to go back home before examining what happened, Naruto led Hinata to the tree line bordering the market. This is it. Naruto showed Hinata the marketplace, shuffling in place, feeling an awkwardness creep into the air. Goodbye, and thanks, Hinata mumbled, blushing bright again, before starting to head back to where her caretaker was last seen. Naruto stared a bit as she walked away before shaking her head again. It didn't work so well this time, the emotion lingering in her throat. It wasn't the cement-like feeling of regret, more a longing for a could have been. This afternoon Naruto was treated normally. There were no glares, no hissed demon. Just two girls in the forest, and Naruto wondered when she would ever experience it again. Later, half asleep dreaming of what could have been, Nariko swore she will feel this again. The sun glared over the rooftops, shining into the eyes of anyone unwise enough to look up. It has been a week since the meeting in the forest. Naruto still felt off kilter, her equilibrium disturbed, the feeling of acceptance lingering in her veins like a hug she didn't know she needed. It messed with her head. A shot at a normal interaction with someone her age. It felt like a type of illusion that was messing with her senses. It didn't help that Naruto felt as if someone was watching her. Every time she ventured into the village, she felt eyes on her back. It was an itch, fire ants crawling between her shoulder blades, and it was making her twitchy. The weird thing was it didn't feel like the glares from the villagers. It didn't feel malicious at all, it was so strange that it made Naruto even more paranoid. Taking a deep breath, she decided enough was enough. Quickly zipping around the corner, she ducked into the alley and hid behind the dumpster, peeking around the edge to see who was following her. A minute passed, then another. Naruto was about to give it up as a bad job when the strange girl she had saved peeked around the corner. Seeing Naruto watching her, Hinata released a startled eep. Her head burning red and her fingers pressing together. Naruto felt off kilter. This is the last thing she had expected. She was unsure what to do. The lingering in her veins was starting to evaporate. This was starting to look similar to what happens when she starts talking to other children. Naruto swallowed the ball in her throat and steeled her bruising heart. She had really thought that the girl was different, that maybe someone could like her. Pushing aside her hurt, Naruto glared out at the girl. What do you want? Naruto was angry at her and maybe herself, but seeing her flinch at her words made her feel a bit guilty. Then she remembered that the girl was like the rest and her glare hardened. Hinata was in a bit of a conundrum. She had been watching Naruto for a week, hoping to learn more about the boy whose words had shattered all she believed about herself and her family. Accepting fault for others' actions and putting them on you is stupid. That's like accepting the option of others as a truth. Those words, spoken with a paean entirely foreign in her cold world, had rearranged all she believed. It shook her prenotions on how the world worked, lit a fire in a heart that felt frozen and lost. She knew he probably didn't even know how amazing what he said was, but to Hinata those words was a lifeline in the sea of blame she had been drowning in. Maybe, if the boy was right, it meant she wasn't at fault. Maybe being herself was enough, she didn't need to keep apologizing for her faults. Accepting fault for others' actions and putting them on you is stupid. That's like accepting the option of others as a truth. Hinata didn't want to accept the blame for other actions, she didn't want to accept others' options as truth. If she did, it would mean that she really was useless and that her family was right about her. A part of Hinata still believed them, but a small fire has started in the hollows of her veins, a small spark started by a boy with wildfire in his eyes and conviction in his words, and Hinata, who is used to the cold emptiness of her life, clung to the sensation, refusing to let the small bit of warmth disappear. So, she started following the boy when he was in the village, a bit afraid to brave the woods alone. And what she saw astounded her. She thought he was brave and strong, that he must belong to an amazing family that taught him how to smile at life like a dare. But this boy, as small as Hinata, was an orphan. It confused her how he can be so strong on his own, surely someone taught him. But the more she watched, the more her admiration grew. She didn't know why, but the villagers, even the shinobi, treated him horribly, and the worse they got, the more he refused to bow to their expectations. Where she had broken under the pressure, he evolved, like steel in a fire forged into iron. When she had seen him ducking into the alley, she was a bit confused. With her Byakugan, she knew he was still there, but she was still learning how to see through multi-layered objects, so after a few minutes she dared to go closer, curious to what he was doing. Only now, staring at him while he was glaring at her with fire in his eyes, she didn't know what to do. A part of her was afraid, not of him but of what he must think of her. The other part was mortified that he caught her essentially spying on him. Overall, it was a miracle that she hadn't ped out and only her head is burning. I'm sorry, the girl mumbled quietly. The roaring in Naruto's ears died down, her anger lowering to a simmer. Naruto blurted out, confused. This is not how these showdowns go. Usually, the name calling would have already started. she had expected the taunting, the lording of her status in the village. It has never started with an apology. Hinata, seeing Naruto was no longer glaring, gathered her courage and stepped closer. Upon seeing the wary way that Naruto was regarding her with, she stopped. "I am sorry," she said clearly this time. Gathering the last of her nerve, she blurted out, "I want to be your friend." Naruto was nonplussed. What? The girl had spoken so quickly she couldn't understand her at all. But she wasn't hostile, so Naruto relaxed a bit. "I want to be your friend," Hinata breathed, breathless. It took all her courage to keep eye contact, to not look down in emberment. But this boy, who helped her even when no one helped him, deserves her courage. And it was courage. It took all Hinata had not to flee before he could react, her heart in her throat and a roar in her ears. Naruto felt as if the floor was pulled from underneath her, that she was caught in an earthquake that only affected her. She felt like yelling what at the top of her lungs, maybe that she should refuse, sure it was a prank, but as she opened her mouth to respond, she looked into the eyes of the strange girl. All the breath rushed out of her lungs, leaving her feeling like she had swallowed wrong. Her eyes a weird pale lavender, was not mocking, was not cruel. She did not look arrogant or entitled. Those eyes were sincere and vulnerable, hopeful, and scared. While plenty of people looked afraid of Naruto, they never looked at her like that. As if a word from Naruto could break everything she wants to believe. And Naruto was speechless. Never had anyone look at her with such hope, as if a word from Naruto can save everything she is. It left Naruto breathless in an entirely new way, a way that lightened her heart and her soul. "Yes," whispered Naruto, almost silently. She didn't know why, but this girl needed Naruto to be her friend, was scared to be rejected, and nobody has ever needed Naruto before, never looked at her with such fragile hope and tender courage. And Naruto wanted to be wanted, needed to be needed, and this girl was asking to be her friend, something Naruto never had but desperately wanted, with an intensity that caught her off guard. "I would like to be your friend," she said a bit louder. But the smile that appeared at her words was like a sunrise after a storm, pure, beautiful, and so happy it left Naruto breathless in a way that she was sure was visible. 'Cause Naruto, for the first time since she could remember, had a friend that needed Naruto. And that meant that Naruto had someone that wasn't responsible for her, someone who wanted Naruto because she was Naruto. It was incredible. Naruto was not alone. And for that, a smile that was happy, pure, and content appeared just for Hinata, the girl who saved Naruto with a smile. The world felt hazy in an unknown way. Never before had such a good thing happened to Naruto. It was like a scene out of her desperate dreams, but real. Never had anyone needed to be Naruto's friend, never mind wanted. It was surreal, a dream come true. In all her years in this village, there is finally someone who she could love and maybe even be loved back. Naruto walked in a happy daze. It was unbelievable. If she had not just come from the area where they sealed their friendship, Naruto might have thought she had dreamed it all. But no, she can still see that smile in her mind's eye. A happy smile, a smile because of Naruto. It felt like a dream. Naruto was so into her thoughts she didn't notice the man until she bumped into him. He definitely noticed her. "Why, you little brat, what are you doing messing around with honest folk? Begone, demon, go crawl back to where you came from. You're a blight. Scram. Before I teach you not to bother your betters." Naruto hurried out of his way. Seeing the way he started lifting his fist in her direction, looking around, she saw that it looked like a mob might be forming. Swallowing her fear, she ran into the forest, praying to anyone who might listen that she would not be followed. Left, right, left, and then right again. She ran until the sound of the village was a distant dream and all she could hear was the wildlife around her. Breathing, trying to force down the lump in her throat, the stupid cement feeling that was strangling her lungs. Breathe, breathe, breathe. Naruto felt a burning behind her eyes, a sensation she swore to never feel again. She was hot, and not just because of the summer heat. Her skin felt flushed and tingly, and the stupid pressure behind her eyes was building, prickling at her senses, warning her of their intent. Breathe, breathe, breathe. Naruto could not have stopped the strangled sob from escaping her. She tried, but the more she tried to suppress it, the louder it slipped out. Breathe, breathe, breathe. At last, the emotion calmed, allowing her to finally take a clean breath. She was a bit startled at her reaction. She was sure it was an overreaction. The man had said nothing she had not heard before. The mob of angry villagers was nothing new. Heck, even the murder attempts, as rare as they are, does not cause such a reaction, so why now? As she was aimlessly wandering, still deep in thought, Naruto almost missed the new sound that was becoming more distinct as she walked. Tilting her head to listen more clearly, she heard a roar. Alright, maybe not a roar, but it sounded like the clashing of two incredible powerful forces. Naruto hesitated to go closer. What if it was dangerous? But curiosity has always been her downfall. Hesitantly, Naruto walked closer. The closer she got, the louder the sound, but she started hearing something else as well. It sounded like water. Now doubly curious, she hastened her steps, finally arriving in a beautiful clearing that was teeming with wildflowers. But the sound came from the water running down from the mountain to the river. Naruto has never seen anything like it. The water crashed into the bottom, creating all the noise she heard, but it wasn't a fight, it was the powerful flow of the water as it joined the river. It was peaceful, realized Naruto. The might of the water made her feel small, not in a bad way, but in a way that made the hurt inside feel less powerful. Kicking off her sandals, Naruto stuck her feet into the river. It was cold, but with Fire Country being in the start of summer, it just felt nice. Why had what the man said hurt her? She pondered. It was nothing new, nothing shocking. What changed? She did. She realized with a start. Meeting Hinata had chanced her. She had lowered her defenses to accept her friendship and never raised them again. Naruto sighed. What now? She looked at the wildflower, beautiful and vibrant. Remembered Hinata's smile, the fragile hope buried beneath shaky courage. She couldn't take back her friendship. She didn't know why, but Hinata needed it, and so did Naruto. But it makes her vulnerable, a small voice in her head complained. Naruto breathed. What a mess. Imaging Hinata's smile made her think of the girl. She was weird, Naruto acknowledged, but kind. Something is wrong with her. Naruto trusted her instincts fully. She knew that as kind as Hinata is, there is something wrong. Not with Hinata's self, but something to do with her. She honestly wanted to be my friend. Naruto accepted, but for her to look at me with such fragile hope, it's wrong. But Naruto, as much as she trusted her instincts, was an orphan, and worse, a pariah. She just didn't have enough knowledge to understand what her instincts were telling her. She sighed. This was such a drag. But in her mind, she saw that smile, a smile because of Naruto. No matter what is wrong, I'll protect her. Naruto vowed. Because Naruto might be small and not very strong yet, but Hinata felt even smaller and distinctively more fragile to her, and if her new friend needed Naruto, the Naruto would protect the fragile hope that Hinata showed her, till the day it blazes. Naruto felt it in her gut, that one day Hinata would show them all, and Naruto would be there by her side, proud and strong enough that anyone who wanted to douse that fire had to go through her first. Naruto smiled to herself, imagining the man she bumped into face if he saw how strong they would be. Imagining the man chibified running from a chibi Naruto and Hinata was funny, it definitely cheered her up. But he wasn't alone, she recalled. There was a mob forming. A feeling of horror replaced the laughter, imagining Hinata being chased by a mob for being her friend chased through her head. A beaten Hinata asking Naruto why. A dead Hinata, trying to escape but not knowing how. Naruto felt sick. Is this going to happen if she is my friend? Naruto desperately asked, wondering if she had cursed her friend without realizing. Should I have said no? She wondered. Then the smile flashed in her mind, and she had her answer. No, I did the right thing. But how to protect her? Naruto wondered, still reeling from the things she imagined. Hinata is a girl. Naruto realized, being a girl is dangerous if you are unwanted. How can I protect her? She can't become a boy, Naruto mused, her parents would probably realize. Maybe if she wasn't my friend. Naruto ignored her heartache at the thought. This is for the girl who smiled because of me, she determined, pushing down how devastated she would be if they stopped being friends. While rubbing the ache in her chest, she felt her pendant through her shirt. An idea slowly crept towards her, an illusion, she considered. The pendant did not make her a boy, it only made people think she is a boy, so what if they are friends but people think they aren't? Naruto bolted straight up, splashing into the river. Luckily it was fairly shallow, so only her pants got wet. That's it. That's how she can protect her friend. By pretending they aren't friends. Now she only had to find Hinata and tell her. Luckily, they made plans to meet up tomorrow at the alley where they had become friends. Naruto spent the rest of the day by the river planning how to protect her friend from her curse. It was the start of a prank to fool the entire village. But at that moment it was only a lonely girl trying to protect the person who smiled because of her. Hinata was nervous. She had snuck out of the compound, eager to go see her new friend. And wasn't that a trip? She had a friend that was happy in her company. But that is why she was nervous. What if he decides he doesn't want to be friends with a failure? She wondered, her thoughts spiraling. Was it a mistake? Was it pity? She didn't know. But he was warm. Surely he can spare some warmth for me. And he was brave, maybe he can be brave for both of us. Hinata wished with all her heart that yesterday wasn't a dream, that the warm, brave and courageous boy had really said they could be friends, that she didn't imagine the smile he gave her, a smile full of wonder. It made her feel powerful and brave, to see that smile. After going back to the compound where the cold seeps into your heart was torture. Going through the motions, hearing what everyone thought of her was depressing. It tore down the high she was on. It threatened the small embers that had started growing in her veins, threatened to choke the hope and joy she was feeling. It left her feeling small, and fragile in a den of wolves. Made her question the small piece of sunshine that appeared in her life. No, she was not going to doubt Naruto, he was the one that showed her how to be brave, he showed her that you don't have to be cold. She is not going to. What on earth was he doing? Hinata rounded the corner of the alley to witness Naruto trying to blend into the shadows with a shirt tied around his head, to conceal his features. Naruto. Hinata. Naruto exclaimed joyfully, then changing tracks he pulled the unresisting girl into the trees. Come with me, he said, his tone warm and inviting. Hinata felt her worries melt in the face of his warmth and sincerity. Feeling foolish to have doubted her new friend. Naruto's hand was warm in hers and he led her deep into the forest, so deep in fact that she was starting to get worried about it. Before she can question him, she heard the water, and he pulled her into a clearing with a waterfall. It was beautiful and peaceful, all around colorful wildflower bloomed, in purples, reds and yellows, with a soft clean white in between. Naruto, this is beautiful, she breathed amazed at the beauty of the clearing. Is this what you wanted to show me? She asked, still awed by her surroundings. No, not exactly, Naruto replied nervously, scratching his head. Instantly her nerves came back. Was he going to take back his friendship? Did he bring her here so nobody could see him talking to a failure like her? Naruto watched her new friend start to panic in confusion. She hadn't even said anything yet. Seeing that Hinata isn't snapping out of it, Naruto gently took her hand. Hinata, she queried softly, afraid of spooking the other girl. Hinata snapped back into reality. Seeing her friend look at her so concerned, made her blush in emberment. She hadn't meant to get so carried away. Sorry, Hinata mumbled, flushed red from the tips of her ears. Why did you want to bring me here? She asked, gathering courage from the concern her friend showed her. It was unlikely he was tired of me if he looks so worried. Hinata roared herself. Looking at Naruto, she saw he was nervous, so she sucked up her fears and patiently she waited for his answer. Naruto was nervous. What she was about to do might cause her friend to leave. She might never want to be friends again, a little voice whispered. Shut up. Naruto snarled at the voice, the image of a dead Hinata more powerful than her fear. Hey Hinata. Naruto cautiously started, still scared of her reaction. What do you know of me? She peeked at Hinata, making no sudden movement. Hinata was startled at the question, why ask me that? Then she paused and looked at her friend. He looked frightened. Is he afraid of me? No. She realized he is afraid of my reaction. So Hinata took a breath, gathered her courage, and thought of how to answer. I know that you are an orphan, she started hesitantly. Seeing Naruto nod encouragingly, she continued, the village doesn't like you a lot. She looked at Naruto, afraid of his reaction to her words, but all he did was wince and nod for her to continue. That's it, Hinata finished, unsure of why she had to say these things. Seeing her confusion, Naruto took her hand again. The physical contact giving her courage. Hinata, I am more than just disliked by the village. Here she paused, unsure on what to say. Taking a breath, she continued. The villagers hate me. Seeing a bit of denial creep into Hinata's eyes, she rushed forth. I don't know why, but ever since I was small, they would hunt me on my birthday. Sometimes they would throw rock or bottles at me, other times they would beat me up till the Anbu stopped them. They would shout at me and call me names. I didn't even know what my name was till I was 3. Naruto paused to take a breath, then look up from where she was studying their hands. What she was going to say never materialized, as at that moment she was tackled by a crying Hinata. Wah! Hinata was horrified. She could see how much effort it took for Naruto to share this with her. While she was not sure why he was telling her this, it was undeniably the truth. Her friend, her first friend ever, was being abused by the village they lived in. And the worst part is, to Naruto it was normal. He wasn't nervous someone would hurt him for telling her this, he was nervous how she would take it, of her reaction. It made Hinata furious that the light in her life was surrounded by so much pain. She was crying for the boy who didn't cry for himself. Hinata? Naruto questioned, still with her arms full of the crying girl. This was not the reaction she had expected. She was unsure what she expected, maybe disgust. Fear. Definitively not for Hinata to cry and hug her as if she would disappear. I'm sorry, Hinata sniffled, trying her best to regain composure. Why are you telling me this? Here Naruto has to take a deep breath. Because I'm scared, she finally admitted. Hinata was stunned. Scared? Naruto never looked scared when confronted by the villagers when she was spying. Maybe of me, she thought, but that didn't feel right either. Scared? She finally questioned softly, her voice a bit hoarse. Of what? Naruto blinked back to reality, having become lost in thought on how to explain. I'm not scared for me, she admitted easily, but of what they will do to you if we are seen together. Hinata opened her mouth to protest. There was no way that anyone was stupid enough to throw rocks at a Hyuga. Then she paused. No one would hurt her, but if her clan finds out she is friends with an outcast, she would be locked in the compound under guard 24/7, lucky if she could even catch a glimpse of Naruto in the marketplace before she would be whisked away. It would happen suddenly, before could even warn her friend. And having Naruto think she is avoiding him. Never. Stealing her resolve, she looked towards Naruto. I don't think they would hurt me. Seeing Naruto about to protest, she continued. I'm from an important clan, Naruto. My father would kill anyone stupid enough to lift a hand towards me. Here Hinata paused hesitantly, but if you have a plan, we could follow it. I don't want my clan to keep us separate if they don't approve. Here Naruto pause. Hinata's from a clan, but looking into her eyes she saw how scared Hinata was that her clan would interfere, that she won't be able to see her. That jostled something in Naruto, a small warm ember replaced her heart, burning a comforting warmth into a steeled chamber. Okay. Naruto started. We only meet here. Before she could continue Hinata interrupted. How will I find this place? Sheepishly she bowed her head. I'm a little scared of the woods, frowning. Naruto thought for a second. Maybe if you follow the river. She looked at Hinata. It goes east past the marketplace. Hinata lifted her head looking at the river. That could work. She won't get lost if she followed the river. I can do that. She nods determined. Then we will only meet here. And if we can't be here, then we leave a note behind this rock to let the other know. Naruto pointed to the rock in between the trees and the falling river. Every day at 10 a.m. we meet by the falling water. Deal. Hinata giggled a bit at Naruto's enthusiasm. You mean the waterfall? She asked, still giggling. The what? Naruto questioned. What the heck is a waterfall? You mean the strange downwards river? Naruto pointed to where the water ran into the river. Hinata paused concerned. Naruto, it is called a waterfall. Gently she asked, haven't you read the stories? Naruto turned stiff. Turning her head to the waterfall she simply answered, no, but her answer seemed to have reminded Hinata of her pariah status. Thinking deeply on how to ask her question, Hinata cursed the villagers. How can they not see how wonderful and amazing Naruto is? How could they do this to someone who shines as brightly as Naruto? Naruto, see, can you read? Hinata cursed her stuttering. This was serious. But her nerves were at an all-time high. What if Naruto took offense? No. The answer was almost inaudible, so soft was it uttered. Hinata wasn't even sure she heard right. But looking at her friend whose shoulders were taut and looked ready to snap if teased. She could see the answer anyway. I could teach you. She offered. Naruto looked up so quickly she almost had whiplash. Hinata was not making fun of her. She isn't breaking the friendship, she is offering to help. The ember in Naruto's chest grew. Is this what friendship is? Protecting each other and helping without a hidden agenda, caring. Whatever it is, it caused a warmth to permeate Naruto from head to toe and caused her heart to burn, but not with the painful fire of hurt, but with a soft glow of sunlight on a cold day, a bowl of ramen when hungry. And Naruto knew she doesn't ever want to go back to before, where her heart only burned to survive, refusing to give up out of spite not hope. But here before her was a girl, who smiled because of her, who cried for her, who was offering to help instead of laughing. And Naruto could not stop the desperate pleas from escaping. But given the heartbreak on Hinata's face she understood regardless. Hinata slowly packed her backpack, pausing every now and then to check to see if she had everything. Her heart was aching even as she smoothly and without pause moved around the room. Her movement elegant, not a hint betraying the turmoil she was feeling. In the house where not even walls can afford privacy, she could not show weakness. Her hands hovered over the brush, her split-second pause the only sign of hesitation she allowed, and into the backpack it went. Picking up a book on botany she added it to the bag before removing a quilt from her cupboard. Folding it onto the bag, she shouldered the pack, ready to leave. Where are you going? Hinata double blinked, the only sign of surprise she could afford. To the river. There are new flowers I haven't collected yet. Hinata's heart was pounding but hoped that her face was expressionless. To show weakness now meant her friend will suffer, and so Hinata clung to composure with all her might. It wasn't a lie either. Lying to an experienced Byakugan holder was impossible, but using the truth to cover a secret was more doable. Be back by noon. Your cousin needs a sparring partner. Hinata bowed her head, she hated sparring with her cousin. Of course, father. Activating her eyes, she waited until he was in his office before leaving her room. Silent as she could manage, she glided out of the compound. Using her eyes to see if anyone was following her, she made it to the market. Heading east, she found the river, or rather stream, and started heading upwards, hoping her friend was waiting for her. She had thought a lot on what to teach him. There was a lot to know, but where to start? Hinata's heart was still breaking each time she thinks back to that thin, scared, but desperate pleas. It wasn't right that he couldn't read. It was one of the first things she learned, and she had been 3. At 5 she is expected to be fluent and already be able to absorb and retain written information. She was already reading a book on botany, for example. Could he spell his name? For the first time, a bit of hatred appeared in her heart. She tried hard not to get angry at the Hyuga, tried hard to be patient with her demanding father, tried to love her little sister. But none of it has ever made her hate. Not even her cousin who hated her. After all, she understood. And it's hard to hate things you understand. But the village. A small part of her hated the village for what they did and still do to her friend. For making the powerful fire he possessed a weak ember. Please. Naruto should never sound so desperate, so fragile. As long as she had known him, he was a force of nature no one could tie down. Please. It broke her heart because she heard what he didn't say. Please care. Please stay. Please help me. Things he was too proud to say slipped into that desperate plea. Please. And as long as he wants her friendship, she will be there for him. Because he was depending on her. Her, Hinata, the failure, the one who was too weak, too soft, too fragile. And so, for the boy who looked at her as if she could do miracles. For him she will succeed. Naruto paced at the clearing with the waterfall. It was only 8. Still 2 hours before Hinata was set to arrive. Her ears were buzzing, her stomach knotted and her skin too small. She was nervous. No matter how many times she had tried to calm herself, fire ants still danced in her veins. She felt jittery, as if her center gravity has changed. She is going to teach me how to read. This is what was making Naruto so nervous. What if she thinks I'm stupid? Naruto breathed. No, she is not doing this to herself. She will do her best and try not to take it too slowly. Naruto breathed. The orphanage matron was always pleased to remove Naruto from reading sessions. While younger she didn't care, sitting still was boring. It was only as she got older that she realized what the matron had planned. And now, here she was at 5, almost 6, and she can't read. And there was no one to help her. It was a devastating blow to Naruto's already shaky perception on the world. Without being able to read, she can't enroll in school, she can't even enroll in the academy. Without an education, she would not be able to find work, even if she left the village. It doomed her to a slow starvation, as she was trapped by her ignorance. And then she met Hinata, kind, wonderful and sweet Hinata. Who smiled because of her? Who cried for her? Who was going to teach her how to read? It made her pinch herself to make sure she was not dreaming. I'm going to be able to read. It felt miraculous, a weight lifting from her shoulders. Her ignorance has always bothered her. It was galling that she was the only one that could not understand what was written in front of her. But I'm going to learn. She doesn't think Hinata knows how much this means to her, how big a change this would make to her life. But she is teaching me anyway. Naruto sat, feet in the river, giddy with a strange feeling that had started to build ever since Hinata looked at her, saw her flaws, and helped instead of laughing. I would follow her anywhere. For Hinata had done something no one had before. She had seen Naruto vulnerable and protected her pride, she had seen Naruto's pain and cried for her, she had faced Naruto's guard and smiled because of her. And Naruto, all of 5 years full of pain and spite, loved that kind girl for it. For Naruto was loyal, and although she had few precious people, those she loved with all she was. She loved Gigi for caring, for trying to make things better. But he was Hokage and far too busy to be a constant in her life. But Hinata had seen how damaged Naruto was, had heard what happens to her, but cried for Naruto as if she was something precious. And even though they are just starting to be friends, that made Hinata one of Naruto's most precious people. After all, it was one thing to see Naruto as a friend, but another to know Naruto is broken, and instead of running, offered to help. It made the feeling build, a powerful emotion that left her breathless in a good way. What it was, she did not know, only it made her feel strong but protected, powerful but loved. And she knew she would do anything for the girl who created this feeling. Believe it. When Hinata stumbled into the clearing, she was glad to see Naruto already there. It was only 8:30, hours before they were supposed to meet, but she was glad her friend was as eager as her. Naruto, she greeted, smiling brightly at his surprised face. Is it 10 already? Naruto scratched his head, tilting it inquisitively. No, laughed Hinata, I was just too eager, she said, smiling. Naruto blushed at the fondness she can see on Hinata's face. Here, Hinata said as she sat her backpack on the ground and spread out her quilt. Naruto came closer, curious to know what all of this was. I think we should start with your name, Hinata said after a pause. Your first word should have meaning, so your name is a good place to start. Here she paused again. I first thought to use brushes, but the river makes a nice clay bank, and you can erase any mistakes. Looking around, she found a stick and walked to the riverside. See here, this is how you spell Naruto, she smiled at Naruto, here you try, it is just copying for now. But Naruto was strangely still. He was looking at his name with an expression she can't place. Slowly, as though in a trance, he took off a pendant around his neck. It startled Hinata a bit as she hadn't even noticed he wore a pendant. Slowly Naruto sunk to the ground, looking towards the waterfall. Hey Hinata. Hinata moved to go sit next to her friend. She watched the strange expression mix with determination and fear. Resolutely she looked towards the waterfall, sensing what he wanted to say was difficult for him. Can I tell you a story? Hinata nodded, noticing him looking at her from the corner of her eye. She didn't know why they are doing this instead of reading practice, but the solemn air surrounding her friend let her know this was important. So Hinata swallowed her questions and sat quietly to listen to her friend. On the day of the Kyubi festival, a little girl was running from a mob that had formed when she was locked out of the orphanage. Hinata listened quietly to the story she could see meant a lot to her friend. He told her how the girl was afraid, but spitefully decided to live, how she realized that no one would help her. How no one cared about her in such a measure that they didn't even know her gender. How one night she saw a horrible attack and realized being a girl was dangerous, especially for her, the one no one would help. How in desperation she asked the Hokage for help. It's you, isn't it? Hinata said quietly. Heartbroken for her friend, looking at her eyes, she saw the desperation she tried to hide. The fear that this would send Hinata running. But Hinata was quiet, she was angry, and heartbroken and so sorry, that her friend had to go through that. To be so scared that you had to deny your gender. It made that little piece of the hate grow and made her tackle Naruto in a hug. Thank you for telling me, she said with a wobbly smile, trying her best not to cry. Naruto was blown away. You don't care, she whispered, afraid that being too loud would make Hinata change her mind. No, Hinata nodded decisively. Naruto is Naruto, no matter your gender. It was still you who saved me from the bullies, still you who became my friend. Here she looked at Naruto. But your name isn't Naruto, right? She guessed, pieces of the puzzle coming together in her mind. That's why you told me, isn't it? You want to learn your real name. Seeing Naruto's hesitant nod, Hinata smiled encouragingly. Burying her anger at the injustice of her friend suffered. So, she said with a bright smile, trying to convey her love for her friend, what is your name? Nariko. Naruto breathed. Gigi said my name is Nariko. Hinata tilted her head a bit at the Gigi part but listened carefully. He said it meant Thunder Child. Pretty cool, hey, she beamed at Hinata. Hinata smiled softly at the joy she could see in Nariko's face. Why Naruto? She asked, curious. Gigi chose it. He said that if I were born a boy, that would have been my name. Hinata smiled again. This Gigi of hers sounded important. Who is your Gigi, Nariko? I thought you lived alone. Hinata was curious, as Nariko obviously loved her Gigi, but she had never seen him. Oh, Naruto blushed. Gigi is the Hokage. He was the one who found me when I was 3 looking for food. He took me to a ramen stand and then when he heard I didn't have a name, named me. He tries hard to help but because he is so busy, he doesn't always have time. But I know he tries. Ever since he found me, he had Anbu look out for me. If villages chased me, they would step in. So, I call him Gigi even though he's not my real Gigi. He's family. Naruto shut her mouth with a click. Blushing up a storm. She hadn't meant to blurt all that out. But Hinata only smiled at her. I'm glad you have someone. And it's true. Even though Hinata was puzzled on why the Hokage would do this, she was glad her friend was not completely alone. What do you want to be called? Seeing Nariko look inquisitively at her, Hinata explained, do you want to be called Nariko or Naruto? Hesitantly Nariko slipped the pendant back over her neck. Naruto. While I will always be Nariko, call me Naruto. It is safer that way. Hinata closed her eyes, so her friend didn't see the tears that build up. It wasn't fair. Hinata thought faintly. This beautiful being, no matter how hidden, was so ostracized that her very being, a part of who she was hidden, never to be seen. And Hinata ached for her friend, because while it doesn't seem to bother Nariko much, it bothered Hinata. She loved her friend. It didn't matter that they only started talking, she was a kindred spirit, a fellow in suffering, and while Hinata knew how to live with a mask, she was heartbroken that her friend, her sunshine, had to do the same. Taking a breath, she schooled her features to conceal her turmoil and smiled sincerely at Nariko. No, Naruto. Okay. Walking back to where she left her stick, she wiped Naruto clean and started writing. Naruto, look at how I write the letters. See, this line is an up motion while you move to the side with this line. Looking at her friend, she smiled. This is Nariko. Naruto looked at her name in awe. This was something she had desperately wanted to know, and now, thanks to Hinata here right in front of her, was her name. Thanks, Hinata, she whispered, truly thankful for the miracle that brought her into her life. Hinata smiled as if she understood. And maybe she did. Seemingly coming to a decision, Hinata started speaking. I do understand, Naruto. She paused, unsure how to continue. Naruto, seeing how important this conversation is to her friend, put down her stick and sat by the waterfall. Hinata's breath hitched. Thankful for this caring girl, who somehow understood without words how difficult this is for her. But then again, Naruto shared her past with her, and trusted Hinata with her secrets. That is why Hinata desperately wants to tell Naruto that she was not alone, that while not to the level of hate Naruto deals with, that Hinata understands. Deciding how to start, she copied Naruto, trying to keep the emotion out of the story. Once there was a famous clan, famous for their use of the Byakugan, a dojutsu that gives the users 360-degree vision, even through objects. Naruto wanted to interrupt, that sounded so cool. But there was pain in Hinata's eyes, so she kept quiet. But it was not a happy family. Hinata talked about a divide in the clan, of main members and branch members, how one was the slave to the other. How on her 3rd birthday she had been kidnapped, and how her uncle died in her father's place, earning her the eternal hate of her cousin. How she disliked violence but was shielded from the clan by her mother, a mother who died giving birth to her baby sister. How the clan started comparing her to her cousin who was a prodigy, and how Hinata, no matter how she tried, could not measure up against him. And how there was muttering in the clan that she was not good enough to be heiress, how much a disappointment she is. And how her father was cold, how he kept making her spar against her cousin who always injured her, and how there was nothing she could do to stop him. How she was going to be a ninja even though she doesn't want to. Hinata stopped to take a breath. You are the first person to look at me as if I was special, that I wasn't a failure. Even though my mother tried, she had been sick for a long time, and most of the time she was on bed rest. But you have no idea how happy you have made me by being my friend. Naruto leaned forward to give Hinata a hug, a soft hug, as if Hinata was fragile. For even though Hinata tried to keep her emotions out of the story, she didn't succeed. Or maybe Naruto, who lives with those emotions, could feel it no matter how hidden. She could feel the desperation for acceptance, the desperate wish for someone to care, the fragile belief that she is less, that maybe she deserves it, the guilt for her uncle's death, the guilt for not being better, even the sliver of anger at her family, for not being better than what they are. And Naruto understands, and even though the story made her angry, she swallowed it down. Her friend needed Naruto to be positive. With all the negative in her life, she didn't need to see Naruto's anger. But Naruto was angry. How could a family with such special eyes not see how special Hinata is, how strong? It felt to her worse than the villagers' treatment. This was Hinata's family, her own people. Who does this to her? For Naruto, she can ignore the villagers. They meant nothing to her. But Hinata can't ignore her family, and no matter how she tries, she can't ignore their words, because they were supposed to love and protect her and they don't, and that was worse than a village that hates you, for they didn't have to care. Naruto tries to find words to explain to Hinata that it doesn't matter who her family is, that Naruto will always care. But there are no words, so she hugs Hinata and hopes she understands regardless. Hinata closes her eyes wrapped in Naruto's arms and lets a few tears slip. For Naruto was radiating love and acceptance for her. And even though she didn't say anything, Hinata understood regardless. I have a friend who cares. I am not alone. So, you're going to be a ninja? Naruto asked. It has been an hour since the emotion-filled conversations. Naruto was busy writing in the riverbank clay while Hinata was looking for flowers to preserve. Yes, Hinata replied. While she disliked violence, she knew it didn't matter to her clan. The heiress was always a ninja in a ninja clan. Naruto was quiet, thinking on how to ask. Do you think I could be one? She asked quietly. Naruto. Hinata questioned, concerned. The question was simple, but the emotion she felt behind it anything but. I never thought about it, Naruto explained. Ninjas protect the village and I really never cared for the villagers, and Gigi can take care of himself. Here she paused for a breath. But if you're going to be a ninja, I will as well, so that we can be together, so that if something happens, I can protect you. A civilian can't protect a ninja. Hinata smiled. If you are going to be a ninja, then there's a lot you need to know. When Naruto started looking apprehensive, Hinata reassured her, I'll teach you. Naruto smiled at Hinata, relieved at her easy acceptance. But Naruto, there is one thing you should know. Naruto paused in her writing at the seriousness in Hinata's voice. I'll protect you too. And Naruto couldn't stop the bubble of emotion rising in her. She didn't have a name for it, didn't know what it was, but it was strong, strong enough to conquer armies and topple mountains, and it grew every day she spent with Hinata, rising, and overtaking all the negative emotions she always had to swallow. She did not really need the emotion's name, but it meant that one day she and Hinata will conquer the world and all their pain. Believe it. Hinata walked into their clearing to find Naruto sitting on a rock reading a book. It was a simple story, but seeing her, Hinata can only feel pride. It has only been more or less 2 months since she had started teaching Naruto how to read, and Naruto was already past the introductory guides on how to read for children. Hinata can see that Naruto was still struggling a bit because she would catch her mouthing different words trying to match them to what's written, but she was picking it up quickly. Hinata was starting to realize that Naruto was smart. Maybe not conventionally, but intuitively. Once she sets her mind to something, she does her best. Hinata knew her friend was brilliant, but she had also started to realize the scope of the village's neglect. Naruto was smart, but no one would believe it for the sheer number of things she didn't know. Before Hinata started helping her, anyone who talked to her would assume she was an idiot, because how could she not know? But Hinata had a burning desire to raise this stupid village to the ground. Her friend had a brilliant mind, was intuitive and had a ridiculous learning curve. To have everyone assume the worst because other people was sabotaging her friend. Well, it made her angry. Putting her backpack down, Hinata started spreading her quilt. It was a comforting motion, a routine they had started to build on. Hinata! Came the joyful exclamation. It made Hinata feel special. Even though Hinata has seen Naruto every day since they became friends, Naruto was always so honestly happy to see her. Naruto, Hinata smiled back, how goes the reading? It was an honest question, as Naruto had finished all the grammar rules, punctuation and now only needs a bigger base of vocabulary. Hinata had thought it would take longer, not because she doubted her friend but because literacy class for immigrants lasted up to a year. But Naruto always has a habit of surprising you, and reading was something she had always wanted to do. It's alright, but I don't think I'm reading this right, Naruto frowned. She received a banquet of flowers from her friend. Naruto shook her head. Banquet is food, right? So how? Hinata accidentally let a giggle slip out, but Naruto only sheepishly ducked her head. At this point she no longer worried that Hinata was laughing at her. She had stopped being so defensive, having realized that Hinata thought it was funny, not that Naruto was stupid. Bouquet Naruto, it means a bunch of flowers bound together. Naruto scratched the back of her head. Oh, that makes a lot more sense than banquet. Naruto fiddled with her top. Do you think I'm ever going to be able to read like you do? She looked at the botany book on Hinata's lap. Hinata smiled at Naruto. Yes, I do. You learned to read in 2 months. That is amazing, Naruto. You just need to learn to recognize more words. Naruto smiled a bashful smile, scratching the back of her head. She was always shy when honestly praised. It raised Hinata's blood pressure. But she said nothing, just smiled, for Naruto didn't need her negativity, she needed her support, and that was one thing Hinata was more than willing to give. Naruto smiled softly to herself. She was happy. The last 2 months has been a dream. Hinata was amazing, having a true friend was amazing, and almost nothing could get in the way of the sheer joy she was feeling when spending time with her friend, except the wince and flicker of pain on Hinata's face. Immediately she dropped her book and headed for a wide tree just slightly behind the rock where they leave messages. It wasn't the tree that interested Naruto, but the first aid kit bundled up in its roots to protect it from the weather. Naruto has never been interested in medicine, not when she had never needed it, but since becoming friends with Hinata it almost became an obsession. Hinata let out a sigh. She hadn't meant to distract her friend, had thought she was concealing her injury well enough, but she should have known better. Ever since she came to the clearing injured after a spar with her cousin, Naruto has made it her mission to help. Hinata remembered that first day fondly. Even if it didn't start off great, it still made her smile with how much her friend cared about her. Hinata was late. It was the second day since her arrangement with Naruto to meet at the waterfall, and she was already late. Hurrying to the market, Hinata hit a winch. Yesterday's spar with her cousin was horrible. She had been unable to defend herself at all from his furious onslaught and was covered in bruises. He had broken her arm, but her father had that healed, along with any bruise that couldn't be hidden, but left any that remained as a reminder. At least that's what he said, but Hinata knew this was punishment for losing to a member of the branch family, no matter how prodigious, punishment for her failure. She hadn't expected it. He had never done this before, but since the birth of her sister, he had become even more cold, more determined in the success of the main branch, that every failure on her part to live up to his expectations was met with harsh words and disappointment. This was the first time it left her physically aching. A reminder. Hinata hurried along the stream till where it turns into a river. She felt that her father was using her cousin as a way to break her spirit, to make her determined to rise up, or break her into pieces, and it might have worked, if it hadn't been for Naruto. Naruto, who looked so vulnerable, who needed Hinata. Naruto, who was so brave, to accept Hinata's timid offer of friendship even when she had been hurt so bad before. And that small ember in her veins, that struggled to fend off the coldness and fragility her family made her feel, had turned into a roaring tornado of flames, incinerating her doubts and self-consciousness. For Naruto has trusted Hinata, the failure, the weakling, with her secrets, with her vulnerabilities, even though she hid it from the world, had listened to Hinata's pain and still loved her, still cared, even though she wasn't strong or brave like Naruto, even though she was scared to stand up to the world, something that Naruto did so easily. But Naruto trusted her, so for Naruto she will not be a failure, she would stand strong for her friend, would protect the one person who needed her to be capable. Not out of spite or pride but because Hinata was the only one who could. And for that Hinata will be strong. Hinata burst into the clearing, so very out of breath she had to stop and breathe before straightening. She was more than an hour late, she hadn't left a message, so it was only desperate hope that made her wish Naruto was still here. But Naruto was still here, looking surprised at her dash through the woods. But something was wrong. Yesterday when she had left, Naruto had been radiating hope and love, but this Naruto looked fragile, as if her world had collapsed. Her eyes were blank, and it looked as if she had been crying. That threw Hinata for a spin. What on earth had happened since yesterday? Naruto, Hinata started cautiously, and then it seemed something registered to Naruto at the sound of her voice, because it was like a switch had flipped in Naruto, the bravest person Hinata knew was clinging to her crying her heart out. Hinata was more than a little bewildered, and definitely concerned, it seemed so out of character for her friend. But then between sobs the story came out. Naruto had been at the waterfall since 8 this morning, full of hope from her new friend, but as the hours passed doubt had started creeping in. Was she too hasty? Should she had waited to reveal her gender, even though Hinata said she understood? Was that just something to say before she left, unable to deal with Naruto after hearing her damage? And then 10 o'clock came and Hinata didn't show up, and the longer she sat there the more hope she lost, until she was sure Hinata was never going to come. That she had chased away the one person that could understand. Hinata's breath hitched, and she cursed her father and his stupid pride, because it was because of him she had been late. And as gently as possible she wrapped her arms around her crying friend. Her heart breaking. Naruto, I'm so sorry, she whispered, my father decided to train me this morning unexpectedly, so I couldn't leave a message. Hinata left out that he did it in spite knowing her injuries were not healed. But Naruto pulled back looking vulnerable but determined, reading the truth in Hinata's eyes she pulled back, wiping her eyes, before whispering a quite sorry. As she moved back, Hinata winced in pain, her arms were especially sore this morning, even though her arm was healed it still felt like a big bruise. Naruto went still, before gently moving away from Hinata as if sensing she was fragile. Hinata was afraid that Naruto would think she was afraid of her, but before she could voice the thought, Naruto chuckled a bit hoarse from crying. As if I'm ever going to doubt you again, she whispered as if ashamed of having doubted Hinata at all. But Hinata understood, she knew Naruto has been hurt before, that trusting in people was dangerous for her, so Hinata gently took Naruto's hands in hers and tried to convey there is nothing to forgive. But in doing so she cringed in pain. This time Naruto paid more attention, still holding onto Hinata's hands she asked, still whispering as if speaking loudly would break this moment, what's wrong? Hinata was hesitant in showing her injuries, but seeing the sincere concern on Naruto's face rolled up her sleeves, showing the black and blue bruising. Naruto recoiled and with a pale face and shaking hands started searching Hinata for more injuries. The more she found, the more she paled. Finally she choked out, "Who?" Hinata was confused until she remembered their discussion on what could happen if the villagers found out about their friendship. "My cousin," she admitted, a bit ashamed. Some color returned to Naruto's face, but her eyes darkened, and a snarl was etched on her lips. "Why isn't it healing?" Naruto asked, concerned. She remembered Hinata saying the match was yesterday. Shouldn't the bruises have healed by now? Hinata bowed her head, misunderstanding the question. "My father felt that it should be a reminder to do better next time," she admitted, feeling safe to do so to her friend. With a flash, Naruto remembered that she healed faster than others, remembered that the kids at the orphanage needed a medic when injured, and never needing one herself. She felt cold. She didn't know any healing herself, she had never needed to. Looking at her bruised friend, something logged in her throat. "How?" she choked. "How can I help?" Hinata looked at the desperation in her friend's face, and although not understanding why she felt it so desperately, she tried to remember how to wrap wounds, but she drew a blank. She had always had the medics at the compound heal her when she was injured. "I don't know," Hinata whispered. But something desperate clawed behind Naruto's eyes, and so Hinata said, "I can look for a book." Anything to stop that desperation strangling the insides of her friend. But while it stopped the desperate fear, it steeled into determination. "And I'll learn," Naruto vowed. Still scared at how slowly her friend healed, but more than ever determined to ease her burdens. Naruto slowly and carefully started tending to Hinata. She still remembered how her fear of abandonment melted in the heat of her anger. She had never liked the village, vowed to live to spite them, always bitter of her lot in life. But she had never been angry, not really. After being so relieved that her friend still cared, that she still needed Naruto, the bruises was a slap to the face. That little voice inside shouting, "All your fault," almost caused her to be sick. Yet it wasn't because of Naruto, it was Hinata's family that did that to her, and Hinata can't heal as quickly as Naruto. Bruises and wounds that take a day to heal on Naruto takes weeks to heal on Hinata. That scared Naruto, to know her friend is hurt, and she is helpless. So, feeling more determined than she had ever felt before, she had gone to the person she turns to when nothing makes sense. Her Gigi. Hinata had kept her promise. Even though she was injured, she still went through the effort of teaching Naruto to read, but Naruto was boiling inside. She did her best to hide it from Hinata, but from the frequent glances the other girls sent her, she was not that successful. Still, she was gentle with Hinata, making sure she took breaks and that she didn't make her injuries worse. On the inside, though, her organs felt as if they were melting in the fire of her anger, turning to steel in self-defense. She felt like breathing fire from all that rage that shimmered in her veins, but the longer she waited, the more it turned molten. Every wince and flicker of pain Hinata tried to conceal, turned the molten fire turned into lava, a force that crashed into the ice of her helplessness and transformed her will to help her friend into a core of diamond-hard determination. Naruto wasn't stupid. It was true there was a lot she didn't know, things like why Hinata's family was hurting her. But she knew that it wouldn't stop here. After the first hit, there was no going back. She knew Hinata didn't see it as abuse, just punishment. Naruto was not that ignorant, and that made her angry, but more than that, it made her determined to be a place of help for her friend to turn to. But Naruto didn't know how to help her precious person. Only knew she needed help. So she put a smile on her face and distracted Hinata from her pain, making up elaborate plots to make her smile. When it was time for Hinata to leave, she hugged her gently, wishing she could feel safe in Naruto's useless arms and let her walk back to a place of pain. Naruto was too small and useless to take on the Hyuga and win. She was just one orphan, a pariah at that, there not much she could do. But she knew someone who could do something, and even if he couldn't, he could help her learn what she needs to learn to help Hinata. and there is not much she wouldn't do to help her friend. She hurried to the Hokage Tower, knowing it was almost time for her Gigi to take a walk around the village. She didn't use to understand why he did this, but she was starting to. Gigi was the leader, he was the one who kept the village safe, but it was difficult to notice all the problems when you don't spend time with the people you are trying to protect. Like she would have never noticed Hinata's pain if she didn't talk to her. He once told her that the village is like his family, so everyone in it was important. Nariko couldn't love the village like he did. It had hurt her too much to freely give her heart to the people that hurt her so, but her precious people loved the village, so she would love them and protect the thing they loved. Seeing the Hokage walk out of the big tower was a relief for Naruto. She didn't want to talk to the guard again, she didn't have time for arguing. Hurrying over, she ran to her Gigi, throwing her arms around him, trembling slightly. Today was a long day, even if it wasn't over yet. She hadn't realized how scared she had been until the Hokage wrapped her in a hug. The Hokage was surprised at the missile that had launched at him unexpectedly, but feeling how afraid Naruto was caused him to wrap her in a hug and shunch into her apartment. Closing the door behind him, he gently sat her down before looking into her eyes. Naruto, what's wrong? Hiruzen was very afraid of her answer, well aware that Naruto was not easily spooked, and that he had not heard of an incident, meaning something could have happened to the girl he saw as a granddaughter without his knowledge. Taking a deep breath, Naruto started her story, about finding Hinata being bullied and them becoming friends in secret, and how Hinata was going to teach her how to read, and softly she spoke of the bruised, of how helpless she was in the face of her friend's pain and how scared she was for her friend having to go home every day. The god of shinobi once more acutely felt his age. He was beyond glad that Naruto has found a friend, beyond sad that he never knew she couldn't read, but proud of how she protected her friendship, well aware that the Hyuga would not stand for their heir to be friends with a commoner, unaware as they are about her heritage. He was proud that Naruto had come to him for help even if he knew he couldn't do much. Every clan in Konoha was internally regulated. As Hokage, he is not allowed to interfere with how they trained their members. But looking at her hopeful face, he knew there was something he could do. Naruto, I cannot interfere with Hinata's training. Seeing her stubbornness about to rear its head, he continued, but I can teach you how to help her yourself. Here he paused, looking at her serious. My wife was a talented nin. She had created a lot of techniques that can be used without chakra, creams to speed healing and promote regrowth. If you are serious about this, I can get you a copy of her journal. But it must stay a secret. That is my condition to this, as well as that you come to me for any questions. He thought for a moment. You said Hinata liked botany, it should help you get the ingredients needed. But once again, this needs to be a secret. Hiruzen knew he loved this little girl like she was family, but he was well aware how his enemies would use her against him. That is why he could only rarely be seen with her, why he never knew she couldn't read. He must keep his distance to keep her safe. But he hoped one day, when he found a successor, he would be able to take her home and introduce her to his children, like he would have introduced her to his wife if she had survived that terrible night. But as long as their relationship is seen as a leader looking after a villagette, then she will be safe, and as long as she knew he loved her, he would keep the status quo. Naruto looked down. She knew he couldn't always help, that there were rules that he couldn't break to keep her safe, why he had the Anbu look out for her instead of helping himself, why he left her at the orphanage. It was why she never told him she couldn't read. She didn't think he would have been able to help her. It's why she had only gone to him when Hinata needed help. And although she was disappointed, he couldn't take Hinata away from her family. She was beyond grateful for the help he offered her. She knew how much he loved his wife, knew she died years ago in the Nine Tails attack. So, she was touched that he would share her work with Naruto. Thanks, Gigi, she whispered, touched. Gigi, she began hesitantly, can I enroll in the academy? The professor was surprised. Naruto has never asked to be a ninja, and although he knew that as a Jinchuriki she would be expected to serve the village, he was sure he would have had to protect her rights should she not want to. So, this came out of left field for him. The academy, he said, slowly looking at her for a clue to where this was going. Hinata is going to be a ninja, Naruto whispered. Understanding came immediately. As long as you can read and count, there shouldn't be a problem. He read her. But Naruto, you should enroll because you want to, not just to follow your friend. The life of a ninja is tough, it could break someone if they don't have the right motivation. He cautioned her. But Naruto looked at him with wildfire in her eyes and iron conviction in her words. I don't want to be a ninja to follow Hinata. I want to be a ninja to protect my precious people. I can't protect anyone if I'm not strong enough. So, I'll get strong and stronger until nothing could take them away from me. Looking at her, he saw a slightly bigger redhead glaring at him with fire in her eyes. I'll get strong and stronger until nothing could take them away from me. Kushina had said after the loss of Uzushiogakure. Hiruzen desperately hoped that her daughter had better luck than she had. But he swallowed the lump in his throat and looked past the ghost to the little girl he cared about. I'm sure you will, he said softly, almost like he willed the world to make it true. That next day she showed up with the book and a bag her Gigi called a first aid kit. And together the girls learned how to make the ointment, Hinata sneaking the ingredients out of the compound, and Naruto learned how to tie bandages just right to be tight without restricting movement, how to stitch cuts and when to just add a little cream with an adhesive bandage. But every time Hinata looks so grateful for the little bit of care, Naruto's feels a bit of her heart darken towards Hinata's family. Because as much as she had wished otherwise, her prediction proved true. Hinata only became more and more injured as time passed, and as Naruto's helplessness grew, so did her determination to one day be strong enough to protect her friend. She was going to be the strongest in the village. If she wanted Hinata to ever feel safe, she would have to be the best, so she would be the Hokage, the strongest Hokage that has ever lived, so that nothing can stand in her way of protecting her precious people. Hinata, Naruto whispered softly to her friend. They were both lying on the quilt Hinata always brings to the clearing, relaxing after a game Hinata invented for Naruto. It was supposed to develop her vocabulary into a more ninja-oriented fashion. Naruto was proud of herself. It's been almost 3 months since Hinata started teaching Naruto to read, and she could read most of the things Hinata brings her. She had even started reading Hinata's botany book, hoping to learn more about how to help her friend. Right now, it was peaceful, the running water creating a soothing sound, the quilt soft and the flowers fragrant. If Naruto closed her eyes, she could pretend this was a dream, but it being reality was so much better. Naruto was loath to break the silence, but she had to tell her friend. Hinata was laying with her eyes closed next to her, a peaceful smile on her lips. She had not been injured yesterday, as her father felt that she should be presentable for the coming festival. It was the most relaxed Naruto had seen her since her training began. Hinata opened her eyes, blinking against the sunlight streaming through the trees. Naruto? She questioned, having picked up that this was more serious from her tone of voice. Naruto smiled fondly at Hinata. She hadn't meant to startle her, but as always Naruto marveled at how easy Hinata could read her, how much she understood Naruto. It was an incredible feeling, having someone care as much as Hinata does. Naruto could only hope she does the same for her friend, hoped with an unmatched ferocity that Hinata knew how much she loved her. I'm not going to be able to come tomorrow, Naruto confessed. In the months they had been friends, they had met up every day. Sometimes Hinata or Naruto would be late, but the other always waited, knowing the other would come in time. This would be the first time they would not meet at all. Naruto? Hinata questioned, a small furrow on her brow, puzzled at the turn of events. She could see from Naruto's expression that this was not just because. Her friend looked resigned to the fact. At first Hinata wondered if it was because of the festival, but the expression on Naruto's face was not a happy one, and Hinata remembered the story her friend told her, or more like confessed, how mobs would form on the 10th of October. Suddenly Hinata felt the realization wash over her. If Naruto had been chased in the past, what makes this time different? And Hinata felt like hitting herself, because Naruto was always so honestly happy here in their clearing that it sometimes slips her mind that she was not as happy outside the protective branches of this forest. Hinata knew things were hard for her friend, had tried her best to help make up for the neglect, but Hinata was only one small girl, and as much as she wants to make life better for her friend, she knows there is not much she can do but be there when Naruto needs her. The mobs, right? Hinata tried smiling erringly, but it felt wobbly. Honestly, Hinata just wants to cry for the injustice of it all. Naruto looked up surprised. She had mentioned the chases months ago, when she told Hinata she was a girl, but the surprise turned into a burst of fondness. She didn't know if Hinata had realized how precious it was that Hinata remembered the little details. For a girl who no one wants to know, with the knowledge that they don't even bother to know something as evident as her gender, the fact that Hinata collects the small pieces of knowledge Naruto sometimes unintentionally lets slip is incredible, proof that to this amazing girl Naruto is precious, is valued. And it always makes Naruto breathless in a good way at how much Hinata cares for her. It's my birthday, Naruto starts explaining, but before she could get far Hinata bolted up straight. Tomorrow's your birthday, she almost shouted. Naruto nodded, a bit confused at her reaction. Why didn't you say anything? Hinata turned to Naruto almost but not quite accusatory. Hinata looked frantic and Naruto didn't understand. Her birthday had always been a day of survival. This was the first time she had a place to hide. No one could enter her apartment without invitation, so she had planned to hole up in her bed and watch the fireworks safely from her window. Hinata, Naruto called confused. Hinata, who was working herself into a frenzy, paused at the confusion and bewilderment on Naruto's face. Seeing the honest confusion on Naruto's face, Hinata deflated. Her friend had not purposefully withheld this information from her. She honestly didn't know why Hinata would want to know. Then something else occurred to Hinata, turning her veins to ice. They chase you on your birthday. Hinata wanted to breathe fire, but once again the confusion on Naruto's face stopped her. This time she paused, trying to reconcile all the facts in front of her. 1. Naruto doesn't seem to think Hinata would want to know it's her birthday. 2. Naruto is confused at Hinata's reaction to the information. 3. Naruto didn't understand why Hinata would be angry that she was hunted on her birthday as opposed any other day. This was painting a bitter picture to Hinata. Naruto honestly didn't see her birthday as special except for the survival aspect. Hinata swallowed heavily. Even as disliked as she was by her family, as much as a failure she seemed, she always had her birthday acknowledged. Breathing deeply, Hinata turned to the apprehensive Naruto, swallowing down her rage at the unfairness of it all. Sometimes it was a weight on her heart, all the things Naruto didn't know or know to expect. It sometimes caused her to lay awake at night, scared of hurting the brave girl in front of her with her inexperienced hands and knowledge. It had dawned on Hinata early on in their friendship that Naruto was relying on Hinata for knowledge of all her basic understanding of the world, and Hinata was so afraid of messing up, on hurting Naruto because she didn't know better. It caused a fear to build in her, a shiver in her heart, but then Naruto would turn to her with a smile, or look at her like she put the sun in the sky and then hung the stars as an afterthought, as if she wanted she could move mountains or stop tsunamis, and that fear turned into a molten steel, a promise that she would always do her best to be all Naruto needed her to be. So, she took a breath and started explaining what a birthday means to Naruto. Yes, it was the day you turned older, but it was also a celebration of the fact you survived another year, a day where your loved ones came together to celebrate that you are still with them, to shower with love and togetherness. And as Hinata kept explaining, she could see a haunted look creep behind Naruto's eyes, could guess at what she was seeing with this new perspective. So Hinata took Naruto's hands in her own, and that's why I wanted to know. Here she tried to push as much love into Naruto as she could. I want to celebrate the fact that you survived the year, that you are in my life. I want to shower you in love to show you how much you mean to me. I want you to know you are precious, and loved, that if you were to disappear you would be missed. Hinata could see the change, see the hope in Naruto's eyes, so she drew her into a hug, hoping she could feel her sincerity. A while later they were once more laying on the quilt, quiet and thoughtful. Hinata was puzzling how to make tomorrow special for her friend, when Naruto quietly questioned, "So, when is yours?" Hinata hummed, not quite making the connection, still deep in thought. "My what?" She turned to face Naruto quizzically. "When's your birthday?" Here Naruto looked bashful. "I want to celebrate that you are in my life as well." Hinata smiled at Naruto fondly. "This right here, I'll protect," she vowed. "The 27th of December, she answered, back to puzzling how to celebrate tomorrow. "Will you be here?" Naruto questioned quietly. At first Hinata was a bit puzzled, of course she would be here. But then she actually thought the question trough. There is no way she would be allowed to leave the compound on her actual birthday. Sagging a bit, she muttered a quiet, "No." Naruto closed her eyes. Her heart hurt, and a small part she didn't know existed felt like shattering. She knew she wasn't treated normally, knew that she shouldn't be so surprised. But she finally understood the sly looks and the ferocity of hatred on her birthday. If Hinata was to be believed, and she did believe her, a birthday was a celebration for surviving the year. Naruto wasn't stupid. She understood now that the village was angry that she had survived the year. It made a small part of her feel ill. But Hinata, a small blossom of warmth, saturated and smothered the hurt. Hinata cared, and now that she thought about it, so did Gigi. He always brought her small thing around the time of October. She had always thought it was a small apology that she was hurt, but now she understood it was her present for surviving another year. It helped soothe the burn that wounded her for years. But now she had someone who wanted to celebrate her survival, someone who would miss her if she was gone. Someone she would miss if she was gone. It suddenly made sense to Naruto. All she had to think about what she would feel if Hinata disappeared, and knew that she is thankful for her friend every day, not just on her birthday. Every day. Like lightning it hit her. "Hinata, what if we celebrated our birthdays on another day?" Here Hinata looked up startled. She had still been deep in thought. "I am thankful for you every day, so why don't you pick a day we could celebrate?" Hinata smiled. She was beyond touched at Naruto's words, and honestly, she was thankful for every day with Naruto as well. "But what day?" she muttered, concerned. "It should be perfect." "How about November?" Naruto offered. "It's between both of our birthdays." Hinata must. The 18th of November. That should be roughly in the middle. Naruto nodded, happy at the date. "When should mine be?" Hinata asked, curious at what Naruto would suggest. Here Naruto hesitated. "What if we celebrate both on the 18th? She asked softly. Hinata looked at her, curious, sensing that there was more to the answer. "I would celebrate your birthday any day you want, but it would be special to celebrate together, and maybe to celebrate a year of our friendship surviving. I know we met in July, but it would be special to make a special celebration day each year, just for us." Hinata smiled, touched at the thought Naruto put into this. "Then it's a deal. We celebrate on the 18th of November. Are you going to be alright tomorrow?" Hinata asked, concerned. She knew she would not be able to help her friend if a mob formed. The Hyuga guards her father ignored her at the festival would stop her. "I'm actually going to stay home," Naruto admitted. This caused Hinata to raise a brow. She didn't think Naruto was talking about the orphanage. Seeing her look, Naruto explained. "After the attack, Gigi bought me an apartment that stops anyone not invited in to be unable to enter. I'm going to stay home and see if I could start reading the medical journal. I'll ask you questions when we see each other again. Hinata felt a weight lift. Her friend will be safe. I'll win you a prize at the festival. Hinata promised with a smile. The joy she felt by the fact that Naruto will be safe almost caused her to glow. She was glad that she had a place to hide, so glad it was not just this piece of forest where she could be herself. Naruto was happy. There were still parts of her that hurt, but they were smothered by the fact of how much Hinata cared. She could never replace the inescapable knowledge that to Hinata, Naruto was precious. And nothing could stop Naruto from loving Hinata. It made the fact that Naruto couldn't protect her friend burn like the hottest of fires, relentless in their punishment for her uselessness. But here on the soft quilt, hearing the water flow and smelling the wildflowers surrounding them, she was content. Listening Hinata describe all the different prizes at the festival, trying to find one she would like. Naruto was happy, and even with tomorrow looming over her, she was not scared.